Talk, 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 talk. Players and coaches talking constantly for the last couple of weeks, culminating at Big Ten and ACC Media Days, both ending on this Thursday. And that is it for the Media Days. Next reports what we get are on the field from training camp across the country. At least we hope. There's nothing that bad goes on between now and then, because that's typically the off-season news. But straight from talking, straight to the football field and getting ready for week one. So the more that all those players and coaches talk, the more that we talk here at the Voice of College Football. And we've got quite the lineup here for the next couple of hours covering ACC Media Days from Charlotte and the Big Ten from Indianapolis. And we get right to it. And before we do, we remind you that Big Ten Media Days Live, presented by Chris Gates Fitness and the training camp program, which we will fill you in on. The link is in the chat, but $10 for the first month. And again, we will provide the details, but man, it is a great deal to have a personal trainer for $10 the first month. We are going to talk ACC kickoff. We've got Tony Siracusa standing by from Last Word on College Football, who's just arrived at home and made his way from Charlotte.
Literally just left, a couple of minutes ago. So there you go.
Another credential to do whatever you will with it. A lot of people keep those and have them around for years and years and years. I never did that myself, but hey, it's a nice keepsake.
Sure. I will always appreciate the ACC kickoff being in Charlotte, giving me that, goodness awful commute of, 15 minutes to get there from the house. So it's funny. You and I were going to do this from the event, which has been over now for, hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. But they were so quick to start taking down the sets and the staging and trying to get everybody out. And I had a flashback. I don't know if you remember this. I'm going to say it was probably about 5 years ago. You and I were doing a live piece from Pac-12 Media Day. And literally behind me were the guys taking down the stage. You remember that?
I do.
And I'm like, wow, this is kind of awkward here. We're on live, and it's so live. They are taking down the stage while I'm doing this. So I didn't want to recreate that. So I figure I'll just hop in the car and fly home pretty fast to do this for you.
Thanks for looking out for us, Tony. But certainly if anybody's been accustomed to lights going off at a stadium and wrapping things up, whether that be your post-game recap or whatever it might be, it would be you.
I think it happened at the Rose Bowl with us one time too. After a game, I was using we were using one of the suites next to the press room, and all of a sudden all the lights went off and all the lights behind me went off while I was on with you. So yeah, we've had our moments.
Well, let's have a moment here to talk some ACC football. Mm-hmm. And we got Matt Zemek standing by from Trojans Wire to talk USC at Big Ten Media Days. So Matt, if you can hang on, we got about 10 or 15 minutes with Tony here. We just got Tony on, but we've got quite the lineup of guests, everyone. So the next hour and a half to 2 hours are going to be really good here at the Voice of College Football. NC State, Syracuse, Clemson, North Carolina with the lineup today. Mm-hmm. I will allow you to take us through those. Of course, North Carolina State coming off the 9-4 season. Grayson McCall, the new starting quarterback. Syracuse, of course, Kyle McCord, who was the quarterback at Ohio State, and Fran Brown coming in from Georgia, looking to get back to postseason play after Dino Babers had led that program for quite some time. Clemson, of course, always a bullseye. And Dabo Swinney continuing to not go to the transfer portal to build his football team in North Carolina. Right. And maybe we start there. Mack Brown, much admired and respected in the sport.
Sure.
Did quite a job initially at North Carolina, but it appears as though this program is somewhat flatlined after another 8-5 season.
Yeah, Mack talked about, and just to give some context to this, the coaches and the players are on stage for about a half hour total per team. And you get the coach for about 15 minutes, Q&A, And then you get the players few minutes each here and there with the Q&A. And then there's a separate breakout room so that you can talk to them more if you want to, but the next team is taking the stage at that point. So, you kind of pick your way through what you want to cover. And I will say this, that at the podium, Mac Brown talked about, and let me digress one more minute. Most of the coaches do not give an opening statement at the ACC media days. And I think part of it is because they're trying to keep the time tight, and they're going from that to the ACC network stage and ESPN and Radio Row. And, they're on a tight schedule and they try and keep it that way. Most of them don't do an opening statement. Mac did. And Mac talked about the virtues of the NIL. And Mac talked about things that his athletes have done with their NIL money. One kid being able to pay his mother's medical care and things like that. One of the players actually talked about using his NIL money, and I'm going to tell you it was Kamen Rucker. Talked about using his NIL money to put back in the elementary school where he went to school, specifically for 5th and 6th grade boys, which sounds a little interesting, he said. But if you remember, if you were a boy, 5th, 6th grade kind of starts to get a little awkward. You're learning you need certain hygiene things if you're playing sports, and you need to take care of yourself. And so he bought backpacks for all the boys at the school in 5th and 6th grade and filled them with those kinds of self-care things, for them and so on. So it was those kinds of stories that Mac talked about, how important it was. And one of the first questions he was asked is, how much longer you want to do this? And he said, I know I've been doing this a long time, and people every year ask me if I'm done or almost done, what my thoughts are on it. And he said, I feel a little bit reinvigorated and a sense of responsibility to keep doing this, because he said, there are so many changes in the sport, so many changes in the game, so much social media attention to everything, some of it true, some of it not true. And I feel a sense of responsibility to help my players grow and get through this new element of life, learn how to handle social media or what people say about you on social media, or work with different elements of NIL and what to do with the money and how to get good advice and all of those things. He said, so he clearly can see himself doing it another year or two. I don't think anyone's going to commit to anything beyond that. In terms of the team, in terms of the season, he took ownership of the collapse at the end of the year, saying that he relied too heavily on the starters, on not even going too deep at some positions, and that his team wore out at the end of the season. That, he had linebackers who were taking 95% of the snaps every game. And by the end of the season, they were physically worn out and getting beat up. And the guys behind them weren't ready to step in because they hadn't gotten the work. He said, no. And he was a little bit maybe of self-realization, said, now I know I've said this every year for the last 3 years, that in fall camp, we're getting everybody more work because we don't want to rely on the starters right away, and rely on them completely. But we're really going to do it this year. This is the year we're really going to do it like that. And so we'll see. We'll see if he actually pulls that off.
Good afternoon to everyone in the chat there. Thanks for all the many greetings. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a stacked lineup of amazing guests. Kicked off by Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. So Dabo Sweeney went today. Of course, Clemson coming off what is for them a third consecutive subpar season after the standard that was set with 6 consecutive playoff appearances. This entire week, of course, if you could put one headline on it, it would be this Clemson, Florida State dark cloud hanging over the ACC. How much of that was a theme that permeated even discussions outside of those two programs?
With the teams, not at all, because the coaches aren't going to address it and the coaches aren't going to talk about it. You're going to get we know about football. We can't focus on the lawsuits. With Dabo, it was really, he knows that the team didn't perform well again. He's not going to change his stance on the transfer portal. I tried to kind of back end a question because there are many themes this week. The lawsuits are definitely one of them, and Jim Phillips' response to the lawsuits, definitely a big theme this week. But when you look at the teams that were there this week and you look at the quarterbacks, like you had talked about earlier, you got Max Johnson and you got Grayson McCall and you've got Malik Murphy and so on. And, it just goes on and on and on and on. Cam Ward, yesterday, 4 out of the 5 teams that were there brought their transfer quarterbacks with them. The only one who didn't was Wake Forest, and Wake Forest has a transfer quarterback, but since Dave Clawson hasn't named Hank Bachmeier the starter yet, he didn't bring him. Point being, I asked Dabo, I said, clearly that is a big issue with the conference. They're touting the quarterbacks, but they're mostly transfers. You have a unicorn, you and SMU, because of Preston Stone. Do you feel a little bit lucky? Do you feel privileged that you've got a returning starter? And he said yes, of course, and he's glad that Cade Klubnik is still there, but that he recognized the need to get more out of Cade, more maturity, as he put it, more maturity on the field, and a second year of working with Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator. He's putting a lot of stock in those two working together for a second consecutive season, as opposed to having to break in somebody new that he got out of the portal, which of course he's never going to do anyway.
Tony, looking through the rest of this week, I did want to hit on Miami. Mario Cristobal. I don't know if it's just his demeanor or the way he comes across. Sometimes people are different than what the facade is. So you find out, okay, they're not as serious as this guy appears to be pissed off all the time.
That I know Mario going back to his days at Oregon. And I pointed out to a couple people here who were at their first ACC media days, if you ever see Mario smiling, grab a picture, because it doesn't happen very often. He is hard-edged all the time. It is who he is. He is not any different off camera than he is on camera. He is edgy. He, talked a lot about expectations, and every year we hear about the U is the U back. And, he expects to compete for the conference championship. I think those are high expectations. I have not completed my ballot yet, so, I won't get too into it. I have until tomorrow to finish my rankings for the conference, but Miami's not going to be at the top. Miami's probably not going to be second. Every bit of success is going to rely on Cam Ward. The defense in Miami will be good. The line will be good. It won't matter if you don't get good play out of Cam Ward. And I'm sorry, Miami fans. I'm sorry. Mario is a terrific recruiter, but I am not sold on him as an in-game coach. And until proven otherwise, Miami's not winning the conference championship.
And they may have the best roster in the conference. They might.
Yeah, it's arguable. I would say they have top 2. If they don't have number 1, they probably have number 2. And Cam Ward is a terrific quarterback, but man, you're banking pretty much everything on him being able to overcome the deficits on the team, including the coaching staff.
And Mario calls him an alpha leader. He was impressed with the way he rallies the troops. They bounce back after adversity, does all the right things on the field to keep his team focused on the task at hand, all of those good things. One other note from the last 3 days that jumps out to you that possibly provides a different insight or a different perspective on any of the teams or the conference as a whole that you didn't have a few days ago?
Jim Phillips, the commissioner. I don't think there's any way you get out of this week without putting a huge amount of attention on that. He was as feisty, if not more feisty, more feisty than I have ever seen him. He was downright pissed off about the lawsuits. You and I have talked about this on air, off air, that I have heard from school administrators at 4 different ACC schools who do not have a lot of confidence in Jim Phillips. One of them actually told me, we wish we had Brett Yormark, because at least he knows how to fight for the conference and circle the wagons. And so Phillips came out swinging. It was in his opening statements, even discussing the lawsuits. Of course, he's not going to get into details, but, and I've got my notes here, the direct quote, he said, "These continue to be extremely damaging, destructive, and incredibly harmful to the league, as well as overshadowing the student athletes." And he said, "We will fight to protect the ACC and our members for as long as it takes." Now, it's easy to say that. Doing it will be different. You and I have gone over the details, and all 4 lawsuits are at the appellate level, so there's nothing going on anytime soon. So it's a little easier to say that. It also means you're not anywhere close to a settlement discussion. But he said, we've had 6 months of disruption now, and I think we've handled it well. But I wind up having to spend a portion of every day on the job dealing with these legal issues. And he was pretty pissed off about it. And he took some slaps without naming Florida State and Clemson. He said, "I think I have a good business relationship with them still, but I'm really upset at the damage that they're doing to the conference, and I think it was unnecessary." He said, "You either believe in the contract you signed or you don't." Now, I think that's an oversimplification. We know things have changed since the contracts were signed. We don't have time to get into all the legalese. That's for another time. But that is one of the takeaways, is that Phillips came out swinging more than he has at any point in the last year.
Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. Tony and the staff does a remarkable job covering the sport and are so good to us here at the Voice of College Football. Check out Tony's work. You know he will have a deep dive, closer look at what transpired at ACC Kickoff over the last 3 to 4 days.
Yep.
Tony, appreciate you stopping by as always.
All right, Mark.
And it's on to football.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Big Ten Media Days Live, presented to you by Training Camp. That is the latest online membership workout program presented by Chris Gates Fitness. We will tell you more about it later in the show. Let's get to Big Ten Media Days on the USC side. It's good to see Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Matt, how you doing today? Oh, we cannot hear you for some reason. I don't know why. Can you hear us, Matt?
Yeah, I have myself on mute. After the off season, like, this felt like the season. Certainly, you know, with Tim, I don't know if you've been reading Trojans Wire, but like, Tim cranked out like 5 or 6 stories. It's like the bear coming out of hibernation. So plenty to cover. And I think the illuminating thing for USC fans, and obviously any Big Ten fans watching here at the Voice of College Football, will find this point of interest as well. But when we try and discuss the ongoing narrative about how seriously does Lincoln Riley take defense, it hit me. It really hit me that there's a nuance, I think, that I haven't been able to articulate. And I think maybe fans kind of have this in the back of their minds, but might not have been able to express it in a very specific way. But when people say that Lincoln Riley doesn't take defense seriously, you know, we know that he hired Danton Land and Eric Henderson and Matt Entz and Doug Belk, all these new defensive coaches. But when a lot of national commentators think that, you know what, they're not sold on the idea that USC's defense is going to be significantly better this year, it's not that they aren't aware that he hired new staff coaches. What they really are saying, at least this is kind of like my new awareness, is that there won't be accountability. That's what they think, that as long as Lincoln Riley is running the ship at USC, as long as he's at the top of the organizational pyramid, there won't be accountability on defense. Like, you have to do things the right way. You have to do things in a certain way. Our product has to look a specific way. That's really what a lot of national commentators, I think, are really trying to get at when they say that Lincoln Riley's not serious about defense. Because, you know, from a USC standpoint, if you've heard Tim Prangley, if you've heard me, like, boy, hiring these highly credentialed defensive coaches, sacking Alex Grinch, okay. Like, this is what it looks like when a coach takes defense seriously, putting the right guys in the right positions, emphasizing NFL player development in a way that we didn't have the past 2 seasons. Like, sure looks like he's taking defense seriously now, but for national commentators, I think the epiphany this week at Big Ten Media Days is that, you know, Lincoln Riley, he's just not going to put his foot down. He's not going to be there to be the tough guy and to absolutely insist on we have to do things the right way on defense. I think that's what a lot of people in the national pundit class are really focused on. And, you know, it's interesting that the USC defensive staff, the guys who appeared in a Los Angeles media availability way back in February when they were meeting the Los Angeles press corps, they all talked about a collaborative model. And that might be something that the national press corps, national pundits, national podcasters really might have missed, because a number of national commentators, one who used to work with me at College Football News, Barrett Sallee, he talked about Lincoln Riley having a top-down philosophy. But if you've heard Matt Entz and Doug Belk and Danton Lynn and Eric Henderson discuss, it's going to be 4 voices in a room, and maybe Taylor Mays also being involved as well. It's going to be a number of voices in the room. It's not going to be a hierarchy where one guy makes decisions and it just filters top down. No, this is a village. This is a village-like concept. So the idea that Lincoln Riley is kind of imposing a blueprint on his defensive staff, that really doesn't seem to match the reality on the ground at USC. But I really think that, in my understanding of why a lot of people in the national press corps don't seem to think that Lincoln Riley gets it on defense, even after the defensive staff hires, I really think that's the nuance. They think that, hey, no matter how many good defensive coaches you have in that room, in that building, it's still Lincoln Riley making the decision. And I can see it to a point, especially in relationship to the fact that, you know, Benny Wiley is the strength coach. You know, Benny Wiley can coach however he wants to in his position, in his role. But with Lincoln Riley above him, you're not going to get the accountability and the ultimate end result. So I think that's really the way national media are perceiving Lincoln Riley. That's been the epiphany of the week at Big Ten Media Days.
Matt, here would be my possible epiphany to add to that, that's somewhat related, and I'm not going to take this to the bank for sure, but this is worth consideration, folks, would be when Lincoln Riley met with the Big Ten Network crew on the side set, when addressed the play calling to let him know, okay, not Ryan Day named by name, but it was brought to his attention, okay, we're seeing more and more top flight play callers as head coaches giving up those duties to focus on being the CEO with all these additional responsibilities and the massive undertaking that is a college football program in 2024. Does that cross your mind? Do you consider it? And he said, well, I'm going to do whatever's best for the program. But he pointed directly to the verification or confirmation of him holding on to the play calling duties as being, well, our offensive ranks back up that we're doing the right thing. And I thought, yes, that is true. However, you're not looking at the program holistically to say, possibly I could be a better head coach and leader of this entire organization. And I'm saying this possibly. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the gospel truth here, but it just seemed as though the total confirmation of him hanging on to play calling duties was their offensive rank nationally, and not necessarily looking at it as an opportunity to be a better head coach and getting involved in the other aspects of being a head coach?
It's a really interesting point. He did mention that he he reassigned Luke Heward to quarterback coach as a way of reducing the amount of time he would have to, micromanage the offense, micromanage the quarterback position, freeing up his time blocks a little bit more for general oversight. One point that's really worth noting in light of this conversation, Mark, is that Ryan Day has given up play calling. He's entrusted that to Chip Kelly at Ohio State. So that's going to provide a really interesting set of stories to monitor. Like, how much better can Ryan Day become as a head coach, having delegated play calling to Chip Kelly? And how does USC do with Lincoln Riley continuing to call plays? It's also worth noting in what Lincoln Riley said on the Big Ten Network set, that the idea of reaffirming his need to call plays, Steve Spurrier, who would definitely know a thing or two about that, said, no, you need to keep calling the plays. And so, and I would add, Mark, that, if this was Caleb Williams' second year, if we were running it back in 2023, there would be a lot better rationale for Lincoln Riley to hand the baton to someone else, because there's already a very obvious awareness of what Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams expect from each other. And so Lincoln Riley could just put the play calling in the lap of someone else and say, hey, you know what we want. This is the expectation. But with Miller Moss coming in, it would seem pretty necessary for Lincoln Riley to be captaining that ship and to be taking hold of the USC offense. You don't want to entrust this to anyone else, knowing that Miller Moss is not an established superstar. Could become one, but he just has that one Holiday Bowl masterpiece. We need to have Lincoln Riley in Miller Moss's ear this season, and I say that very literally because this is the year where we have the helmet technology. And so Lincoln Riley being able to talk to Miller Moss in the helmet, man, like that, there's real added value for USC with Lincoln Riley being able to be the guy in the headset for Miller Moss.
Yeah, I am certainly not stating that Lincoln Riley has made a mistake by not giving up the play calling duties in this specific season, to your point, which is a valid one for sure. And I'm not even saying that he should give it up at any point. I'm just saying that, to me, it was telling his validation for keeping the play calling was justification based on an offensive rank, which we all know you can run an offense and develop quarterbacks and score 50 points a game. That's not the issue. It's that the head coaching responsibilities, the list has grown massive, and it's become much more complicated, and you just have to be more of a CEO. Now, he may prove us wrong, or me specifically wrong in the next few seasons. We shall see. Matt, the defensive staff, of course, I think it took quite a while for Lincoln Riley to be asked any questions about the offense. I don't know that he even was when he was at the big podium, because it was all about defense. And to your credit, Matt, you have instructed America, and specifically Big Ten media, to pronounce D'Anton Lynn's name correctly. So I think that's been taken care of, I believe, because a number of people, I think, are increasingly getting it correct, me included. When he was first hired, I incorrectly pronounced his name as well. But the entire defensive staff, I don't think there's any question, at least at this point, that those were good hires. But it's always interesting to get the backstory of how those relationships were built, how those discussions came to be, at what point he knew D'Anton Lynn was the right guy. He said, shoot, we talked for 30 minutes the first time, and I just thought in my gut, this is the guy. This is the guy to turn this thing around.
Obviously Lincoln Riley was impressed by D'Anton Lynn. I think one of the things that's really important in just affirming in terms of Lincoln Riley's move for D'Anton Lynn is that, the transfer portal opened December 4th, and USC's last regular season game was November 18th. So that was not Thanksgiving weekend. It was a week earlier. And so with that extra week, many people thought, and we talked about this here on the Voice of College Football, Mark, we talked about the idea that, okay, Lincoln Riley has this extra week. Boy, if he can get a defensive coordinator in place before December 4th and that December portal window opening, like USC could really make some gains in the portal. But Lincoln Riley took his time. He didn't feel the need to just rush the hire. He was willing to wait it out for D'Anton Lynn. And then when Chip Kelly was initially, not fired by UCLA, like that created instability in and around the UCLA program and enabled Lincoln Riley to swoop in. So it's just an instructive lesson that waiting for your guy, waiting for the guy you think is the right fit. You might lose some recruits, you might lose a few portal prospects in one cycle, but you can always circle back at a later portal cycle. And so like that to me is one of the instructive elements of D'Anton Lynn and Lincoln Riley hiring him. And while we're at it, while we're talking about the portal, Lincoln Riley made an allusion at a reference at Big Ten Media Days. We're not completely done yet, unquote, in terms of the roster. So maybe there's a late stage defensive line or offensive line pickup. Man, that would be tremendous news for USC if the Trojans can pull that off.
Matt, I know that, of course, USC was the focus for you this week. You can catch all of Matt's work at Trojans Wire, but anything else that stood out to you from Tony Petitti on throughout the last 3 days?
I was struck by Dan Lanning today. I mean, that dude just breathes confidence. And, a lot of USC fans have a sore spot about Oregon crushing USC and NIL and recruiting. But, man, when you watch Dan Lanning speak and carry himself, it's no secret why this guy lands the big fish, right? Like he was almost laughing at the podium. Like he was enjoying himself. He was carrying himself like the big dog in the room. Like that's an alpha male. And Lincoln Riley can be pretty beta at times, trying to hem and haw, hedge, rationalize, spin. Dan Lanning's just click, clack. I mean, he's just swaggering into that building, owning the room. Phil Knight's money, yes, really important, often a tipping point. But Willie Taggart's not doing this, folks. Mark Helfrich is not doing this, everybody. Like Dan Lanning is the king, and he, by owning the room the way he does and the way he did today, Big Ten Media Days. By the way, we've noted Steve Spurrier. Like I never miss a chance to reference Spurrier. Spurrier studied Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Dan Lanning said today, we're studying Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Like he is all in. Like he's doing all the motivational tactics. So anyway, like it's not just Phil Knight's money. Dan Lanning, you can see why he is making a killing in the recruiting trail on the portal. And he has Oregon in position to contend for the Big Ten title and the national championship.
Folks, you get a slice here of what Matt Zemek provides us on the USC channel every Monday and Friday. We get together every Monday with Matt and Tim Prangley on Trojan Conquest. That's at 7 Pacific time on Mondays. And then Matt and Tim providing the best in USC call-in shows. That's Friday at 7 Pacific as well. And every day it's Trojans Wire. Anything there in particular, Matt, that you'd like to highlight?
Like we're just trying to cover the heck out of USC Media Days. We have a ton of stories, like every utterance by Lincoln Riley, by Kamari Ramsey, by Jonah Monheim, by Miller Moss, the three players that USC brought to Big Ten Media Days. Ton of news, and like we've written, like I'd say 15 stories in the past 24 hours with more to come. So like we're covering as many angles as we can here at Trojans Wire.
Matt, we so much appreciate you stopping by. I know that you've got a ton going on. Thanks for stopping by, and we will see you on Friday.
Absolutely, with Tim. Thank you.
Again, it's Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, and it's the USC call-in show with Tim Prangley every Friday at 7 Pacific right here at the Voice of College Football over on the USC channel. Let's keep it rolling on Big Ten Media Days Live, presented by Training Camp. That is Chris Gates' fitness program that we will tell you more about in just a minute. But first, we're going to talk some Penn State football. Folks, leave those comments and questions there in the chat. The super chat's available. If you'd like to ask some Penn State questions, Marty Leap's here from Rivals. Marty, what's going on today?
How's it going, Mark?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good. I mean, I know you and I feel like we have this conversation just about every summer at this time, but when you get media days and camp's right around the corner, my oldest, this will be his first year playing varsity ball in high school. He starts camping about 10 days. It's the excitement for football season really starts to build this time of year.
Since you took us down a familiar path in regards to what we hear every year, I thought it was rather, for the Penn State fan, probably nauseating, but for me, it was somewhat interesting to hear a media member when Franklin was at the big podium asking about the speech that he made after the Ohio State game 2018, the good to great to elite speech. And now here we are 5.5 years later going into year 6. And I thought the reporter actually did a decent job of not being accusatory, but still bringing up where Penn State stands on the elite status board. And Franklin handled himself rather well. Because that's kind of the theme that he has to deal with on a national scale and a conference scale every time he meets the media.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you and I have discussed this on here as well, where I think the 12-team playoff can really help him on that front, on that the great to elite speech. Because again, there's no program that would have benefited more from a 12-team playoff if that's what we would have had this entire time than Penn State. So I think that's got a chance to really help him with that this year. But one other comment that James made that I think is very true is there are very, very few schools in the country where you can consistently win 10 or 11 games and fans just not be happy enough with it. It's not good enough. And he said, hey, we embrace that at Penn State, that championships are the expectations. We haven't delivered on that yet. Running back coach Jay One-Sider, I remember last year he was meeting with the media and made a similar comment to where, there's not too many schools where you can consistently go 10-2 and fans wind up being PO'd about it. So, yeah, I think that is something that is always going to follow him, those comments, until that jump is made. What is that jump? I don't know. Is there really a way to quantify it without winning a national championship? Again, I don't know. But with this new 12-team playoff, if they can consistently be in the playoff every year, which I think is going to be expectations, I know it's definitely the expectation this year, then I think you can say like, hey, yeah, we're consistently in the playoff, especially if you get there and you start winning some games. You can start to make that argument that maybe you've made that jump, even if it doesn't include winning a national title. Because winning a national championship is very difficult, right? I mean, I think everybody would agree Ohio State's an elite program, and they haven't won a national title since, 2014? So the national championship, I think, to be a quote-unquote elite program, but you definitely need to be in the playoff with regularity, winning playoff games, 2 things that James Franklin has not done yet. Really, the only 2 things he has not done at Penn State.
And to that point, that's why I found it also interesting that when Franklin was on the set with the Big Ten Network crew, and they asked about the college football playoff and pointed out, hey, aside from Ohio State, Penn State would have appeared at more college football playoffs than anyone, 6 in the last 10 years, that you would have thought, I would have thought at least, that James Franklin would simply have said, yes, this is a great opportunity. We got an expanded playoff. We have been an excellent program. We would have made the playoffs this many times. Therefore, the playoff is our goal, and we expect to be there most of the time or this season or whatever. But he actually moved into it even further and said, we have talked to our team about not just getting to the playoff, but arriving at the playoff. Now, he didn't address winning playoff games. He addressed, and I thought that was interesting, he addressed arriving at the playoff in the most advantageous place, meaning we're going to host a playoff game or we're going to get a bye and get to the second round.
Yeah, and I think some of that is, it's you want to come off exuding that confidence, obviously. I think there is a quiet confidence in this team. I mean, I know the defense lost a ton, but this defense should still be really good. And offensively, and he touched on this in media days also, where the growth needs to be made offensively. And I think there's a lot of confidence in the building that Andy Koldernicki is going to make that happen. So I think those factors lead to those comments as well. And I mean, I know even to build on that further, there have been steps taken in the recent months to kind of, win and weatherize Beaver Stadium a little bit more to make it prepared to host a playoff game in December if it comes to that. So I definitely think that is the expectation, and it's going to be on this coaching staff to make that happen. I think the talent's there. I mean, the schedule sets up well for them this year. Even if you go 11-1, let's say you do your normal, where you beat everybody but Ohio State and Michigan. We don't play Michigan this year, so say you beat everybody but Ohio State. And 11-1 Penn State, whose only loss is likely a close loss to Ohio State. That's a team that I think is probably right there for the discussion for those 5, 6, 7 seeds that are going to host a playoff game. So I think James wants that to be the expectation because he holds his program to a high standard. I also think he knows, with the current state of the fan base, of donors, alumni, all that things of that nature, that just simply coming out and saying making the playoff in a 12-team playoff is not what people want to hear. They want to hear that sort of thing. So I think the fact that he knows that's what the message people want to be portrayed, combined with that drew the confidence they can make that happen this year, is what led to him, like you said, kind of just digging in a little bit further when he was given an opportunity to, really kind of have that cookie cutter coach speak comment where it would have been appropriate, would have made sense, and he decided to go another way.
Now, Marty, the probably biggest theme of the offseason, aside from that, in terms of on-the-field execution, is about offensive explosiveness and what the new OCs can bring. But obviously, they've got to have the players to do it. The wide receiver play last year was lacking. Julian Fleming joins, and others just kind of address the potential of being as explosive as they would like to be.
Yeah, and he mentioned that if you look at the overall numbers on the offense last year, they weren't necessarily where people wanted it to be, the staff included, but they did everything well outside of being explosive. They ran the ball well, they pass protected well. They just didn't have those explosive plays, especially those explosive pass plays. And I think that's where Koltonicki comes in, because he mentioned at Kansas, that's what Andy Koltonicki did best, was scheming guys open to get those explosive pass plays. And his run schemes and a lot of his run blocking schemes are very good, and they're very creative and very hard to stop. And when you throw in the running backs that Penn State's going to have with what should be a pretty good offensive line, again, especially an offensive line that I think is really going to be built to run block this year, I think that's where a lot of the excitement comes. And you mentioned Julian Fleming, and I know a lot of people at Penn State are very excited fan-wise about Julian Fleming, because everybody remembers when he was at Southern Columbia, which is a state powerhouse here in Pennsylvania in high school, putting up big numbers, the 5-star recruit, this sort of thing. I think a lot of people have that version of Julian Fleming in their mind still, which he's not. He's a very good player. He's a player who, with a good year, is probably going to have a shot to play in the NFL. But I think what Fleming really brings to this offense more than anything else is he was one of the best downfield blocking wide receivers in college football the last 2 years. Last year, Penn State's downfield blocking took a big step back, thanks in large part to losing Parker Washington and Brenton Strange to the NFL. And that's why the run game was not as explosive last season as it was in 2022. So I think having Fleming for that downfield blocking is really going to open a lot of things up, really going to help spring Singleton and Allen for those explosive run plays this year that Singleton and Allen became known for as true freshmen in 2022. So, yeah, it's going to come down to the explosiveness. I mean, Kansas had one of the highest explosive play rates in the country last year. And that was Kansas. You had Jalen Daniels, who's very talented, but when Jalen Daniels was out and Jason Bean went in, they didn't miss a beat. And not a knock on anybody on Kansas's offense, but Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, these tight ends, even some of these receivers they have, talent-wise, is definitely a step up over what Koltonicki had at Kansas. And if he can be explosive with those guys at Kansas, there's a lot of reasons to feel confident he can bring that explosiveness to Penn State's offense and really help open things up this year.
The 3 players they had on the side set for the Big Ten Network and for the media on the side, 2 defensive players. They had the tight end, Tyler Warren, who spoke well of Drew Aller. And obviously, he's the player that's on the spot from the standpoint of taking his 25 touchdowns and 2 picks and making that more explosive, which, of course, ties into the wide receivers. But people are really targeting Drew Aller as either showing that he's elite or not.
Yeah, and I know you and I have discussed it a ton that all the tools are there for Drew Aller. He has all the talent in the world. And even the numbers last year, his overall numbers weren't that poor, but it's because of what he did against Michigan, what he did against Ohio State. If you would take the performance he had against Maryland and swap that with the performance he had, let's say, against Michigan, Penn State still beats Maryland. Do they beat Michigan? Maybe, maybe not. But if he comes out and plays extremely well against Michigan and they lose, or against Ohio State and lose, I don't think there's as much criticism around Drew right now either. Now, again, that's on him to be better in the big moment. Anyone who watched that game last year in Columbus, he had the deer in the headlights look a lot in that game, and that didn't help matters. But it's on him. I know it's probably the least creative thing to ever say that a football team's success is going to come down to what their quarterback does, but it truly will, because all the other pieces are there for this team. If Drew Aller can come out and play like the 5-star prospect he was, this offense will be extremely explosive. I'm not saying he's going to be Joe Burrow, but it's not unreasonable to think you see a jump like you saw with Burrow from his first year at LSU as a starter to the Heisman year. Again, not to say that Drew Aller is going to rewrite the record books and win the Heisman Trophy. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think the tools are there like they were with Burrow, where you could see that big jump. Now, again, helped that Joe Burrow had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase as well. But again, I think Penn State's receivers room, I know I've said it a bunch, there's more talent there than they've shown. You throw in Andy Kotelnicki, who's really good at scheming guys open. You go back and watch Kansas tape last year, there's a lot of times where the only person in the screen is the receiver catching the ball. He does a great job of scheming guys open. I think that's going to work out really well. I think Kotelnicki also does a better job of kind of building his offense around what he has. One of the issues with Mike Yurcich at times was trying to, square peg round hole it with trying to fit guys into what he wanted to do, not necessarily what they were fit for. So I think all of those issues will be addressed this year. But yeah, like you said, the eyes are on Drew Aller. If Drew can take those steps, this offense will improve immensely. And I feel comfortable saying they're going to be in the playoff. If he doesn't take those steps, I don't know if that happens. And if that doesn't happen, I think the program as a whole is really going to have to do some soul searching and looking in the mirror this offseason to have essentially wasted a quarterback this talented, the most talented quarterback they've brought in since Christian Hackenberg. And, we also have the last 2 years of Hackenberg. Not that was apples to apples for a lot of different reasons, but still, if you have a quarterback that talented, you can't help him get over that hump, especially if he does go to the NFL and have success, you're really going to be sitting there questioning yourself as a coaching staff and trying to revisit, like, all right, what did we do wrong and how can we improve on this in the future?
Marty Lee, Penn State Rivals, dropping by to break down Penn State, of course, media days in Indianapolis this week. And now it's on to training camp here in just about 4 or 5 days. Marty, we appreciate you stopping by. Everybody check out Marty's work again at Penn State Rivals. All right,
Absolutely.
Marty.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. Always appreciate it.
Thanks, man. We'll see you.
Yep. Talk soon.
All right, folks. We know that you take your football seriously. Do you take your fitness level seriously? We certainly hope that you do. And to help you do just that, we've got a special offer from our guy, Chris Gates at Chris Gates Fitness, and his special plan that is launching this week. And it is training camp. So listen up. We've got a new sponsor, Chris Gates Fitness membership. It's called Training Camp, and it's just about anything that you could possibly want it to be. There are daily workout plans that are specific to the day. There are even nutritional regimens in there. He shows you how to do the exercises. There's coaching available from him online, and also a community, because we all know that if it's tough to get to the gym, tough to work out at home, tough to do those things day in and day out, that having support is important, and you've got a community. And Chris himself has been coaching people for years, and he's a massive football fan. So why not support from that standpoint, but do it because you are going to benefit. Blends fitness and sports together to help you achieve your goals while connecting with a community of sports fans that are doing exactly the same thing you were doing. They are facing the same challenges. So if you've struggled to stay consistent in the past, maybe you feel confused on how to do the exercises, Training Camp is here to help. When you join Training Camp, you'll get top-notch coaching from Chris. He'll deliver monthly workout plans to help remove all the guesswork. And so you can just show up, put in the work, then have confidence that you're doing what is going to work. The workout plans are customizable. They're designed to fit your busy lifestyle so you can stay consistent and see your progress week to week to week. You get all this for less than your weekly coffee run. In fact, Chris has a special going on right now. Massive discount. If you sign up this week, you get your first month for just $10. That's an 80% discount. Use the promo code VOICE. You've got the link. It's right there in the chat. We have posted the link in the chat. The link is also in the description section of all the videos right here on the main channel here at the Voice of College Football. It is Chris Gates Fitness and Training Camp, and this is the time not to delay, but to do it now and get yourself in tip-top condition. All right, let's head it out to Indianapolis, and our guy that's been on the scene all week at Big Ten Media Days, of course, it's Jonathan Rhodes. JR joining us from Lucas Oil. JR, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. Here in Lucas Oil, we're starting to pack everything up, and it's coming down here. So we just got done listening to Dan Lanning. Sherrone Moore was right before him. They went early with Dan Lanning, so I missed part of Sherrone Moore to go over to Dan Lanning when he started, and then they ended early. So I'm glad I got what I could of Dan Lanning.
So with 6 more coaches hitting the podium today, I will leave it wide open for you. Who was most impressive? What stood out? What do you think was meaningful?
Yeah, we didn't have a Deshaun Foster situation today, so there wasn't any talk about a very short statement. They actually started late. They started about 5 minutes late, so every coach was kind of rushing through some of their stuff, and some coaches were done with their statement by the time it was time for questions and stuff. So, they kind of rushed through it a little bit, but still got some questions in. I got one of the Michigan communities questions into Sherrone Moore. So if you didn't see that was on TV. I think TJ said they decided on those questions together, either the entire community or just the guys on screen. But however that worked, he did a good job with that. And Sherrone Moore he doesn't expand a whole lot in his press conferences. So at least from what I've seen. So that was a little interesting, but
neither did his predecessor.
Yeah, neither did he, but he had a little bit more entertaining stuff about mowing grass and things like that. You heard smash from Sherrone a lot. So that's one of those things where you count how many times did he say it. But yeah, I think PJ Fleck was probably the one that kind of stole the show the most at the podium. I tweeted it out earlier, but the Oregon guy who was next to me, he leaned over and he said, "Is it just me or is this guy really impressive?" And I kind of laughed and I thought, oh boy, if all of the fans in the Big Ten other than Minnesota fans would hear that. Of course, I tweeted that out and Minnesota fans were very happy that, he's making a good impression and things like that. So
I agree.
That was fun. And he is. I mean, he's a very good speaker. Even in his press conference, I didn't get to catch a lot of it because I was recording other stuff. I mean, he is very exciting, and you do like to sit there and hear him speak. Kirk Cignetti also was a little bit that way. He was very much leaning into kind of the we're coming to the Big Ten. He mentioned the last 2 conferences he joined. He was playing he was picked to be last, and then he was playing for the conference championship game that year. And so when he said that, everybody kind of was like, is he making a prediction here? And he said, now I'm not saying we're going to do that this year, but it was interesting to hear from him. Let's see, Sherrone Moore, obviously everybody on the edge of their seats when he came up, Dan Lanning as well when he came up. Nothing else super memorable from the other folks, but Jed Fish, I guess he did do a good job in talking about, what Washington was last year and kind of tempered expectations, but still talked about, wanting to get back to the playoffs and wanting to have a successful season, continuing in the Big Ten this year. I don't know if he ever said that the playoffs were a goal, but he did talk about wanting to get back there this year.
I've always enjoyed conference media days. We heard from Tony Siracusa earlier. He gave his report from Charlotte on the ACC side, and now we're rolling through all of you from Big Ten media days. But it's just different this year, and I think it brings a breath of fresh air to the proceedings when you bring in these 4 new coaches and new programs, because they're just so different than what we currently have in the Big Ten. So obviously the constant narrative all week is, how is the Big Ten going to adjust the current Big Ten to these 4 new teams they play football versus their style and trying to fit into the Big Ten and travel and all of that. Is there anything that was said this week that makes you think differently about one of these teams, that makes you think, oh, they might be better than I thought, or maybe the reverse?
I think probably the most interesting part was listening to all of the players and hearing them kind of joke around. You know, you hear from the coaches a lot, but you don't always hear from the players a lot. And so them being a little bit more lighthearted with some of the media and them talking like that was really interesting. I'll be honest, I was swayed by Donovan Edwards today. He was probably the one that, you know, talked the most about his past and who he was. And he opened up and talked a little bit about last year. He wished he got the ball more a little bit. And, you know, how sometimes he wanted to, you know, tell Sherrone Moore, hey, get me in there. I want to carry the ball. But obviously Blake Corum was one of the greatest running backs, in college football playoff history. So, you know, there wasn't a whole lot to complain about, but then he talked about his faith this offseason and how that's changed things and how he just feels like he's a different player. I think at one point he said he doesn't even feel like there's a starter in the running back room. Obviously that's not true. He's, you know, trying to talk about anybody can get carries and doing well with that. But, it was really interesting to hear about his mindset. I don't know if he'll have, you know, a better year than I expected. I already expected to have a pretty good year with him being on the cover of the video game and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it was interesting to hear him talk about the mindset change from last year to this year. And I know there's plenty of Michigan fans in the chat, so they'll appreciate an Ohio State fan talking well of one of their players.
We always talk well of Michigan. They are the national champions. They are the 3-time Big Ten champions. So I don't know that I've ever uttered a negative word about Michigan football. So anyway, JR, Matt Rule, did you get a chance to hear from Matt Rule?
Yes, Matt was yesterday. And one of the biggest takeaways from listening to all these different coaches, and I'll get to Matt here in just a second, but is how different some of the media are. And like the Nebraska media and the Iowa media are very similar in the fact that they're kind of like, you know, raise your hand. Oh, okay. You want to go? No, you go. It's kind of like that Canadian hospitality that gets joked about where it's like, oh no, sorry, I spoke over you. You go. And you can definitely, you know, kind of feel that reflection in Matt Rule. Matt Rule, I mean, he wants to know everybody's name at the press conference. And so, you know, here in the big press conference, you talked about your name and where you're from first. And even in the smaller press conference, if he didn't know you, he would answer your question. Then he would say, now, what's your name? And they'd say their name. He'd say, you're not from Nebraska media, are you? They say, no. And he's like, well, I appreciate, not a hard question, or something like that. You know, he'd get their name and kind of make a comment to them. And then they'd get back to the next person, kind of, you know, humanize the entire thing with him. But he was really interesting just in talking about, the way he's built the team. Of course, he had a lot to say on the walk-on situation, really advocated that, you know, if we're going to increase, because that was the day when that came out, if we're going to increase the scholarship limit to 105, we have to make sure there are opportunities for walk-ons as well. There were some questions about, you know, well, could you just give some of those walk-on scholarships? And, you know, he talked about how sometimes he doesn't even know some of the walk-ons that are always, you know, interested in coming in or ready to come in because he's so focused on recruiting. Now, he said, obviously, he gets to know those guys as quickly as he can, but he's not always super aware of every single person. And so that does hurt things with the walk-on situation. But fantastic listening to Matt Rule. I mean, just a primo guy. And like I said, he wants to know everybody's name, really relational.
It sounds like you've had a similar impression of those two coaches as I have. If you're just talking about speaking from a podium, PJ Fleck's the best.
Yes.
If you're just talking about speaking from a podium and delivering messages. Now, if you're talking about having a conversation, Fleck's awesome as well. But Matt Rule having the professionalism and the polish, but is mixed in with a very conversational approach. He will tell you more than you ask. You'll ask him a question and he'll tell you like 10 times more than what you asked for. He'll go into all sorts of backstories and interesting anecdotes. I was extremely impressed with Matt Rule last year.
I totally agree. I mean, that's a great way to put it. It felt less like a press conference and more like Matt Rule having a conversation with 50 people at one time. And that's kind of, I guess, what I was getting at with Sherrone Moore. And not to say that it's a negative of him, because you get more questions in, which is nice with Sherrone Moore. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to answer a question because Sherrone Moore was a lot like Ryan Day, where I forget which player it was the first day, but he looked over and he said, "Oh, is the president here? Oh no, it's Ryan Day." And I think any player looking over probably would have said the same thing, if not more, when Sherrone Moore was speaking, because he had quite the large crew in front of him there. I got over early and thankfully got a good spot for my phone to record. But yeah, very interesting how all the different coaches are, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses and things you like, things you don't like. It's very interesting.
Great work this week, JR. We appreciate you being here. You can catch JR on the Big Ten Huddle, correct?
The Big Ten Huddle, it's on the College Huddle YouTube page, but yes, the Big Ten Huddle.
And also, of course, right here at the Voice of College Football on the Ohio State channel, you can catch JR posting content on a regular basis over on the Ohio State channel. But thanks for hanging out in Indy for 4 days for us. We appreciate that, sir.
No problem. Hope to do it again next year.
There we go. All right, JR. Have a good one. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We kicked around with Sherrone Moore, and certainly JR gave his take. We'll get a little bit more here from our guy, TJ Ronan, host
what's up, Mark?
at the Voice of College Football, Michigan, of course. I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Really enjoyed your interview with JR recently or just now. And, man, hey, shout out to him because he really, put the team on his shoulders this week, and, he hit it out of the park.
Yeah, that was good to see. And again, well stated. Thank you to JR for representing the Voice of College Football this week at Indianapolis and getting on the big screen a number of times, including his question that he was able to. And I explained this to TJ the other day that you got probably 100 to 120 media in the big room at the end of the football stadium in the end zone, and they probably only get about 7 or 8 questions in. So not everybody gets to ask their question, but fortunately for us, JR was able to rep the Michigan channel and get in the question that was communicated to JR to ask Sherrone Moore.
What's funny about that question is that question actually originated from an Ohio State fan. So we got an Ohio State fans question from our channel. We crowdsourced it, and our community came through, and because we have a good Buckeye viewership, just keeping tabs on Michigan as always, and it was great to see. I'll tell you, when I was watching the interview, and then when JR got the opportunity to actually ask the question, I was just like, wow, here we go, man. Like, it was just great to see.
JR probably did too good of a job. They probably won't let me back next year.
Yeah, he crushed.
All right,
so
TJ.
Let's get it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about Sherrone Moore. So, of course, coaching the 3 most important regular season games last year, we did see him in front of the media more so than any other first-time head coach. But at the same time, it's now his program. It's his team. It's his deal. He is the guy. I saw him on the side set as well with the Big Ten media crew and with the Big Ten Network. And he's not the most talkative guy, but he gives very complete answers. He's very intelligent. I was super impressed with him, and he just seemed a little bit more, not that he was ever not at ease or nervous or anything like that. I'm not saying that in any such way, but it's clearly his program, and he's very confident.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so, but I also think he was a bit reserved and mindful and humble. He knows he has still a lot to prove, right? He's taking over a well-oiled machine for the most part. Like, yes, there was departures in the draft, but there is also some extremely talented individuals who are coming back this year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, and obviously he had to reconfigure his entire coaching staff and revamp the recruiting department. So, even though Sherrone Moore did show the ability to be a good game manager on those 4 games last season, there's still a lot to prove. And I think he knows that. I think, at the end of the day, yes, Jim Harbaugh did anoint him as the next head coach in Michigan, but he has to prove that he is, in fact, qualified or worthy to be the head man at the University of Michigan.
TJ's live tonight for his call-in show, so give TJ a call tonight over on the Michigan channel. It starts at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So Donovan Edwards, I didn't see the players who showed up. So who else was there besides Donovan Edwards?
So we have Donovan Edwards, Makari Page, safety Makari Page, and then Max Bredesen. These are your senior leaders for this year. And interesting interviews. We also got some questions in for Makari Page. We were able to ask Makari Page the transition from Jesse Minter to Wink Martindale. So that's cool. We're actually uploading those videos as we speak to the Michigan channel. So any of our Michigan community in the chat, stay on the lookout for those. Those are uploading as we speak. But yeah, I mean, well-represented players in Michigan. We do have a senior class that I'd say is a bit, not as high in numbers because so many left last year in the draft. But, Donovan Edwards really is the face. I think we all know that. He's obviously the face of the video game. There's a lot of pressure on him, and as JR was talking about with Donovan Edwards, it's his year, and we're going to see what he can do because he's going to get the Blake Corum role where he's going to be RB1. So, I think the players represented themselves well at Michigan or at Media Day today. The vision is the same. Win a Big Ten championship, go to the college football playoffs, and contend for a national championship. The vision has not changed, even though there is a change at the helm at head coach. But, I think you could see the transition, which is what Michigan wanted, did transition to the players. And it's good to see that, we aren't losing anything that we had, but the question remains, Mark, and I know you agree, do the results transfer to the field? And we're going to find out together.
Sherrone Moore definitely seems to be very confident in Grant Newsome taking over the offensive line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Grant Newsome is what we call a fast riser. He is in high demand. There were rumblings that he may take an NFL position, but Sherrone Moore was able to rein him back to Michigan. He was formerly the tight ends coach last season. So he's worked shoulder to shoulder with Sherrone Moore personally, and without question, he is the next man in charge in terms of offensive line. But not only that, there is a belief out of Ann Arbor that Grant Newsome could be a future head coach at U of M. He's another one that's being groomed. Former player who unfortunately had a tragic injury that made him have to medically retire from football. He almost lost his leg over this injury, and he's the epitome of a Michigan man. Just high character, extremely high IQ individual, and I do expect the offensive line to maintain its level of dominance. Now, do I expect it to be Joe Moore award-winning quality? No, I don't. But do I expect it to be elite? I do.
Got TJ Ronan on the line. You can catch TJ, of course, every Tuesday and Thursday. So it is Thursday, folks, and it's your opportunity to talk with TJ directly. The call-in show on the Michigan channels tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time. You join John Diadamo and TJ Ferris Khan as well on Tuesdays, and that's at 8 o'clock Eastern time as well. All right, TJ, before we let you go, any other parting shots, anything else that we need to talk about?
Nothing too much on that end. I think Michigan is going to take the approach of defending its title, being the hunted. Sherrone Moore talked about that, also saying we are still hunting, just because we are a hunted team now, we are also on the hunt. And, Michigan has a lot to prove. There's some rumblings with the quarterback situation heading into camp. Is it going to be Jack Tuttle? Is it going to be Alex Orji? I don't think we know. I know there's some people within the industry who are hearing rumblings that it might be Jack Tuttle. I'm not there yet on that. I think the coaching staff has not made a decision. I'm looking forward to fall camp. But as it stands right now, Michigan's looking to be a contender for the Big Ten title this year, heading into the season. And I think Sherrone has the team in the right place, but we're going to see how it goes through fall camp, and then obviously when we get kickoff start of September.
Picked fourth place by the Big Ten media. I think that's
what are they doing?
Fair to a certain extent. I don't know what they're doing.
No, I agree. I would.
Yeah, not that they can't win the Big Ten championship. So I don't think there's a gap, a substantial gap between 1 and 4 necessarily.
Yeah, no, I would. So I would put Ohio State and Oregon above us. The Penn State one's questionable because they just haven't done it. But I mean, I understand the media's perspective in the sense of uncertainty at quarterback, new head coach. You got to prove it. So it's up to Michigan to prove it like they've done the last 3 years. And, show the media, show the world, show the fans, show the rivals that Michigan is still king of the Big Ten. So it's up to us to do it. We'll see what they can do with it.
All right, TJ. Appreciate you being here, man.
All right, Mark. Yeah, you too, man. Have a good one.
Again, it's 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight with TJ on the Michigan Call-In Show. Let's go to the new kid on the block. Those Oregon folks invading the Midwest. Brian, what's going on?
Mark, how we doing? My friend, how are you?
We're doing great. Maybe not as great as you are. I would like to do the show from outside. I have dreamed many times of being able to put the entire set on rollers, just like on a platform with rollers, and I'd roll it out when it was nice out, and I'd roll it back in at night, and that would be my dream.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It's just all about trying to get internet access out here on the edge of the continent. Sometimes it's a little difficult.
Well, Dan Lanning seemed to command the room pretty well, and he's got that way about him. We had Matt Zemek on from Trojans Wire, and of course we ran through USC, but his other impression of this entire festivity today was that Dan Lanning loves his football team, is ultra confident about his program, loves being in the Big Ten, thinks it's the best conference, is ready for the challenge, and all things are just thumbs up.
Absolutely. I think he killed it. I watched everything, as we all do, as football junkies that we are, and I think his opening statement was just tremendous. I think he came out and nailed it. I think he hit every point that was trying to be made. But, he doesn't come off sounding like a politician, right? We're in these era of these politician. Everything is, I got to talk about this and go back to this statement and this statement. Never answer the question correctly. Never answer what the guy's actually asking. Go back to the platform. And, I heard a lot of that throughout the other coaches. No offense to those other guys, but they have to be on brand. And it feels like Dan Lanning has a little bit more authenticity to that. And it feels like it just comes across a little bit more natural than some of these other guys, to compare and contrast just their opening statement. It felt like, PJ Fleck felt like he was yelling at me through the thing. I felt like, geez, okay. So it just contrasting styles, but you're right about Dan Lanning. I think he has the blueprint. He knows what he's doing, and he has a vision for the future.
That's funny you say that about PJ Fleck, because I just had the coaches rolling one after another. I wasn't doing it live, listening to it live. I try to conserve the time and just rip through them one by one. And when PJ Fleck, I was in the kitchen doing stuff and I'm listening, taking notes while I'm cooking, doing other stuff. PJ Fleck came on. I had to run over to the laptop, kind of knock him down a few rungs on the volume meter. He loves to preach. Our buddy Steve Dace likes to liken him to. He says PJ Fleck is basically what you would get if a Pentecostal youth pastor was a head coach of a football team. So.
I mean, row the boat. I mean, he's already got it. He can just transition right away, right into the service with row the boat. That's his first sermon right there.
That's it. Also, I was going to say PJ Fleck, he's on the brain now. Dan Lanning was able to specifically talk about what makes Oregon unique and that they're not going to shy away from that. They're certainly going to be themselves. They're going to bring this brand. He mentioned the ducks in the water. We bring him on the road. That's what we're going to do. We may have a different uniform than you expected us to wear against your team. All of that comes with the Oregon brand.
And I think that's great. I've got a YouTube channel out here, and I try to do it differently than other people as well. I've done it for a long time. I do a live stream, and we'll end up chatting about pie or something. It turns into food chat. How do you like your steak? Questions or whatever. And I think there's a willingness to be a little different out here, and I think if you embrace that, doesn't mean you need to be completely different, right? It doesn't mean you need to be exactly the opposite of everybody else. I think there's a blueprint for being a successful football team, right? And he's got it, and he understands this. You got to have togetherness, you got to have toughness, you got to have all these things. But a lot of this is coach speak. I think what Dan Lanning has really done well out here is embraced that we're doing it different, and you have to do it different to be competitive. Nike and Oregon have a very organic, unique relationship. You need to lean into that. While other people are trying to use that as a reason why you're successful, because of Nike. Nike's not buying their success right now in their stock pricing. They'd like to have that thing go back up to where. My point being is that everything is ebb and flow, and I think Oregon knows right now they're a hot ticket and they're a hot name, and people want to be a part of it. They're exciting. They're a brand that's exciting, and they're coming into a new conference that's really steeped in tradition. And so they're going to come out here and do something different. But we're not going to come out here to try to piss people off. We're doing it. We always try to do it in a little bit lighthearted manner. The classic example is throw that gigantic duck in the river. That is genius. That's the kind of thing that Oregon branding does differently, and we're willing to do it differently. It might be a chuckle from some of the old school, who say, "Oh, you're not taking it serious," or something. But we're trying to keep it light, and I think Dan Lanning has really embraced that. To compare and contrast, I think Mario Cristobal struggled with that a little bit. I think Mario wanted to tamp it down a little bit. He didn't want the jerseys so excited. He didn't want to wear the same he didn't want to wear different outfits all the time. He wore the same shirt basically for 3 or 4 years. And the whole point is, I think that if you embrace the different at Oregon, you can really do some stuff, because I don't think you really can compete tradition to tradition with some of these blue bloods that we have out there.
Speaking of which, the chief competitor appears to be, and the preseason prognostications don't always fall in line with what it's supposed to be, but Ohio State's typically a national factor, meaning just basically every year. And it's a neck and neck race, it seems, with the Buckeyes for the Big Ten championship, at least on paper. I'm sure Michigan and others will have something to say about it. Certainly, Ohio State's so good and so talented that Oregon could have a lights out season and not win the Big Ten championship. That would be fine. They could go to the playoff and still have a second life to win a championship there. Or they certainly are capable of beating Ohio State both in the regular season or a championship game rematch and winning the conference because they seem to be that good and that prepared. Our buddy Spencer McLaughlin asked a question about the defensive line, the interior in particular. Does that seem to be maybe the only separation between those two teams, or maybe the only concern that Oregon has from an X's and O's standpoint?
I think the Oregon defensive line, and shouts out to Spencer McLaughlin, he did a great job over there. I think the defensive line is something just because you have guys that you are replacing who were really quality players and who had been there a long time. So I think there's actually a lot of really good players on the defensive line. People just might not know that much of them. They're younger guys, but Dan Lanning talked about a couple of them in his interviews today. And I think that when it comes to Ohio State, you got to tip the cap to Ohio State. Mark, you and I both love history a little bit. When Oregon played Ohio State in 2010 in that Rose Bowl, Terrell Pryor and last year Jim Tressel or whatever, those last couple of years, that team had lost a couple BCS games in a row, maybe 2 or 3 in a row up to that point. And they were on a mission. That team was absolutely on a mission. This Ohio State team reminds me a lot of that in that same setting. They've had the last couple of years trouble with Michigan. It feels like this year they're going to completely flip the script on that one. It feels like they've got the upper hand. They're the team to beat. They've got all the pieces they want. It's just whether they can put it all together. Oregon finds itself, I think, in the same kind of category where they had a heck of a year last year and they've been building. Each year they have been getting progressively better, and you expect this team to be really good. Can Oregon's defensive line hold up against this onslaught of great offensive lines in the Big Ten? I think that's why you play the games. But I do think that historically, Oregon has done fairly well against the Big Ten opponents when they face them. And I think sometimes a lot is to be said about physicality of this, that, and the other. I think Oregon has become a much, much more physical team. Not only with Dan Lanning, also with Mario Cristobal. So it's been building.
I guess we'll stay on this comparison because from a rhetoric standpoint, it doesn't seem much different for Ohio State. Maybe they've got a little more hype than usual, but not much. They've averaged 11-1 for 20 straight years. So their players just continue to say, well, beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, win the national championship. That's what our goals are every year. So this is no different. What's a successful season for Oregon? Because a national championship, not that they're not capable of winning it, but it's a difficult climb through this playoff. So what would make you satisfied this season?
Well, let's start with that Ohio State game at Autzen, right? So I think the reason I think that Oregon is in a lot of people's lists of possible potential national championship contenders is, one, I think the schedule breaks out for them, right? They have marquee games against marquee teams. If they can get those wins, they're going to be very well respected. At the same time, they have the big game against Ohio State at home, and I think that that's going to play a big part in their success. If they get past Ohio State, now you're writing a different story for that rest of that schedule, right? Because now it's about, can you hold on and get the right seeding, or get the right this, that, or the other, and put yourself in a position, because as well as I do, that in the past, Oregon could very well, just as well, win against Ohio State and then lose another game down the road that they shouldn't lose, Maryland or something. Now, the ideology is, no offense to Maryland, but the ideology is that I think we've kind of done the calculation of what this schedule could look like. There could be 2 or 3 opportunities for this game to happen. You could see it at Autzen. You could see it again in the Big Ten championship game if Oregon holds serve the rest of the year, maybe loses to Ohio State, or vice versa. You could also possibly see this as a 12-team playoff at some point in there. It's an absolute storybook sort of situation for this. I think Oregon needs to beat Ohio State in game 1 at Autzen to really make their case. I think that if they go through the losers bracket, I think that's a fine story. I think that's great for them, but it's kind of what was expected for them, right? I think the actual bar has been set, that the expectation is to get to the 12-team playoff for Oregon. I think that is a legitimate expectation. And they've been so close, and if you would have done it last year, you would have been in it, right? Whether or not they win the national championship, that I think is a completely different bar, right, to be set. Doesn't mean that you can't do it, and if you're in the 12-team playoff, then you should have just as much of an opportunity as anybody else. But I do think that if you get yourself into the 12-team playoff, maybe host that first game, I think you're in a real sweet spot. Anything can happen at that point. You got to roll the dice, but I don't think you set yourself up for failure this year by saying you have to win the national championship for it to be a success. I don't think Oregon's in that position yet.
We've got Ryan Winter here from Sports Chat 503, so you can catch Ryan's work right here on YouTube, and I encourage you to do so. Ryan, you're a guy that enjoys interacting with other college football fans, enjoying a good road trip to a different stadium, a different part of the country. And of course, you held the Pac-12 near and dear to your heart, making those trips obviously more regularly. Have you already thought about where you might venture this fall?
Oh, yeah, I've already booked. We're going to Michigan. So Michigan is this year. Next year is Penn State. There's opportunities there in the future, Ohio State. But I'm really wanting to go to Wisconsin. I don't know how the schedule is going to break down in the future. And when it breaks down into a thing where you could play a team 1 year and then not play them for another 2 years possibly, or whatever the case may be at home. I don't know when the next time Oregon's going to play out at Madison. So that's one that's exciting at the end of the year. No offense to Purdue. The Northwestern game next year is going to be wild because it's in the little soccer stadium. That could be interesting trying to get seats for. But yeah, no, I'm excited to go see other schools. My son is going to be a freshman at Oregon this year. So his first year of being at Oregon is in the Big Ten. He'll have his next 4 years. We'll try to go on the road to a variety of different games if we can. But it is a definite different journey. I mean, we're going to travel overnight to get to some places, or have to take an extra day to get there. If you have any sort of snafu when it comes to the airline or something, we could be completely out. If the plane doesn't leave on one day, the next plane leaves the next day. We're used to being able to go to Los Angeles like at any time. Like, oh, you missed the 12:30, there's a 3:30 next. But the Pac-12, you're right. To give one last thing, shout out to the Pac-12. I went through my stages of grief with the Pac-12. I hit them all. I was in disappointment and depression and anger and all that stuff for quite a while, because I do think that it's a shame that they took our conference from us on the West Coast. Everybody wanted a part of the West Coast, but nobody wanted the West Coast to be its own thing. And there was poor leadership and everything else, but I do think that our conference out here was a great conference. But you know what? Now I'm on to bigger and better things. I've gone to acceptance in the stages of grief, and now I'm looking forward. I'm looking at hope, and I think Oregon's got a real shot at it. I also think that Oregon's going to do fairly well in the other sports, especially men's basketball. So I do like Oregon's transition. I think Dan Lanning is the guy to do it. I also have to give a shout out to Dan Lanning this last year. He had a unique thing where when Saban retired, there was all that noise about Lanning. The biggest thing by far of the entire year was when Lanning said, he's staying, the grass is damn green in Eugene. They said, the parents said, what do I need to do? Or Dan Lanning said, what do I need to do? The parents said, how about do a video? He does the video, he sends it out to her, and then of course it gets over like 1 million views. I mean, the Oregon creative team is fantastic. But Dan Lanning staying and really cementing his legacy here and saying, this is where I want to be, that was the biggest thing for us, because it felt like we were getting into some stepping stone stuff where people were leaving for their dream job. And we feel like Oregon's a great place to be. And so the fact that he kind of reverberated that and volleyed that back to the rest of the nation, I think is fantastic.
Ryan, we always appreciate you stopping by. It's always good to see you, man. And enjoy the rest of your summer. The football is going to get here soon enough. So enjoy the rest of your summer, and we will talk soon.
Obviously, yes. So I'm out on the golf course. Blessings to you and your family, Mark. Really appreciate you and everything you do for college football, buddy.
Thank you, Ryan. Sports Chat 503, everyone. We'll see you, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Ryan Winter. Phenomenal. We love Ryan. He has a fun time over on Sports Chat 503. He's been joining us for a long, long time. And you just got a sense right there in listening to Ryan in terms of what kind of football fan he is and what kind of person, in that he loves his Oregon Ducks. He wants them to win every game. He's passionate. However, he loves college football. He loves other fan bases. He loves other programs. He's interested in other programs, gives them all sorts of respect. So he's got it all in perspective, and it's good to hear from Ryan. And we, of course, have an Oregon channel, so please check out our Oregon channel. I had a conversation recently with Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football about the Ducks, so you can always check that out. So you're serious about football. I hope you're serious about your fitness as well. We've got a new sponsor here at the Voice of College Football, Chris Gates Fitness, and his online fitness training camp. Chris is an online fitness coach. He's a massive college football fan. So you got that in connection with Chris. And he's created a fitness community designed specifically for football fans just like you and me. So the community's the important aspect of this, in addition to Chris being a complete professional and knowing his stuff and pointing you in the right direction. If you're ready to elevate your health and fitness, and you should be, we should all be cognizant of fitness. It's, if not the most important thing in life, I don't believe it is, but it's very, very, very close to being the most important thing. If you don't have your health, you don't have a whole lot of other things in life. So your health and fitness goals should be important, and you can do it with a group of like-minded people looking to support and encourage each other. You have to check this out. Okay. I've gone through the website. I'm going to do it here in a second as well. You've got customized monthly workout programs that will help you build muscle, burn fat, feel more athletic, and you've got access to live Q&As with Chris, exclusive community support, and more that will help you stay accountable and work toward your goals. Training camp members also compete in fitness challenges each month, as well as sports challenges like weekly football pick'em. How about that in the fall, where Chris gives out free prizes like home gym equipment, supplements, free one-on-one coaching calls, and more. And if you join this week and use the code VOICE, and you can catch the link, it's in the chat. If somebody's in the chat and can grab and drop the link once again, but it's at the top of the chat. It's also in the description section of this video and every video here at the Voice of College Football. It's at the very top. Join this week and use the code VOICE, and you'll get 80% off your first month. That's just $10. I've had fitness apps. I've got friends who has fitness apps, and they don't get the community. They don't get the coaching. They don't even get the instruction on how to do the exercises. Plus, there are tips in there about nutrition as well. So don't miss out. Again, go to chrisgatesfitness.com and the training camp program. That link is in the description section. And again, the promo code that you use is VOICE. Chris Gates Fitness Training Camp. Do it today. Do it right now. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've heard from USC, Oregon, Michigan, and others. It's been a good time. We got our report from Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football on ACC Kickoff. We always appreciate your contributions here at the Voice of College Football. Please use the Super Chat, and we will answer your comments and questions. We will have Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. He will be stopping by, and I have got to tell you, I've lost track of everybody else that's going to stop by. Hopefully, could see Justin Adams from our Nebraska channel here at the Voice of College Football. Also could be Daniel House from Gophers Guru. And so all sorts of good stuff. As mentioned by TJ, and it was a good reminder that you will see clips of Ohio State players and coaches, Michigan players and coaches, Oregon, USC, all on those respective channels, Nebraska as well. So again, video clips, interviews of coaches and players on those respective channels here at the Voice of College Football. I am currently working on program rankings. So those are going to be released starting on Friday. I was checking out our program ranking series from last year. And so I'm going to slice it from, I believe, 135 to 80. And then we'll do a 80 through 40 and then a top 40. And so be looking out for that and be ready to debate me. I am sure there will be plenty of people out there that will have something to say about my program rankings. So those are to be released starting on Friday. So those are not my top 25 for this season. Those are not team rankings. Those are program rankings. Also, we're going to announce just here in the next few days our in-season program schedule. I was sharing some statistics with somebody today, and they wondered why maybe we've had a bit of a financial collapse or slump here at the Voice of College Football. Not a collapse. We'll call it a severe slump here at the Voice of College Football. And one of the big reasons why is we've not had a set schedule here for quite some time. And maybe that has something to do with it. So we are going to get set on an in-season schedule, and we'll announce that very soon. All right. While we're waiting for your comments and questions here at the Voice of College Football and our next media contributor, hey, I'll run through my notes and my take from around the conference. We heard from TJ Ronan on Sherrone Moore's media days. I have little else to add to that, except the enthusiasm unknown to mankind. That's somewhat interesting. I know that comes from so that predates Jim Harbaugh, apparently. That came from Pops Harbaugh. We have an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. There's some hyperbole for you. All right, we talked to Marty Leap from Penn State Rivals. I did note this yesterday that I thought it was rather an overstatement by James Franklin, just going on and on and on and on about the travel challenges at Penn State. I believe they are going to have charter flights, and they play 5 or possibly 4. So everybody plays a 9-game conference season. So you play either 4 on the road or 5 on the road, and they flip-flop it to make it fair from season to season. But that isn't an advantage or disadvantage to Big Ten scheduling, is that you do play an odd number of conference games. Therefore, you play more on the road or more at home. And so for Penn State, they either play 4 or 5 on the road. Well, considering they only play one West Coast team, that's USC, I don't understand the big deal about the schedule concerning Penn State having to travel and playing in such a remote location. I get it. They don't necessarily have an international airport, but if it's not been a problem to date, I don't know why it would be a problem with one more longer road trip. So instead of going to Iowa or Wisconsin or Nebraska, they're going to USC. Okay. It's not the golf team. It's not the tennis team. It's not the softball team. With the golf and some of those other sports, of course, they travel south or they travel west and they just hang out for 3 weeks. But with softball, baseball, I got to think that those are the sports that are going to have the challenges from a scheduling standpoint. We got Matthew Miller chiming in with a super chat. Appreciate that, Matthew. Mark, what do you think of my Big Ten bets? UCLA under 5, USC over 7, Iowa over 7.5, Rutgers over 6. All right, let's get right to these. Let's check out the schedule. The one that jumps out as a no-brainer is Iowa at 7.5. Is Iowa not going to go 10-2 against this schedule? Or 8-4 against this schedule? Iowa's gone 10-2, 2 of the last 3 seasons in which they have had a 7.5 over-under, and they beat it by 2.5. All right, but we'll start from the top with UCLA and first-year head coach Deshaun Foster, whom we heard from. Now, I got to say, I was going to be quite harsh about Deshaun Foster, and I did take a little jab or 2 or 3, but I was fairly mild. This may not just be his strong suit, speaking in front of a crowd, but on the side set with the Big Ten Network crew, I got to say that while it was the worst of the interviews of all the coaches, and I saw every coach except for maybe Ryan Walters. I think I saw all the other coaches on the side set with the Big Ten Network guys. That I did not see Curt Cignetti. That Deshaun Foster displayed himself in a much better fashion in that conversation with the Big Ten Network, but it still wasn't good. It was still the worst, but while his podium performance was the worst by far, it was like ranking Joe Biden's debate performance as, there had to be a worst in history before that, but maybe it wasn't the worst in history by much. But then Biden's was the worst in history by, a huge chasm. This would be the same. That Deshaun Foster's performance at the podium was the worst by a ton. His side set performance was the worst, but it wasn't awful. That's the best I can. Maybe that puts it into people's current perspective. So the UCLA football schedule here. Under 5, so they've got to go 4-8. Of course, that 5.5 would be really nice. So UCLA has 3 non-conference games, and only one is basically a sure thing. Although with this football team, maybe a trip to Hawaii isn't. They're not going to be an overwhelming favorite. It's not going to be like I don't think they're going to be anything much over 17. And there are double-digit underdogs that win in college football every week. Every week. So that's a win. Indiana at the Rose Bowl should be a win. But So I do think that they win those 2. Probably. And then they should beat Fresno State. They should, but that's no guarantee at the end of the year, Fresno State. So there's 3 games that they should win, almost for sure. So they've got to win 2 other games for you to lose your bet, Matthew. And Minnesota. And then, there is real questions about UCLA, I should say. But man, for the last 3 years, they've been a really good football team. 8-5, 9-4, 8-4. Yeah, I think that's a good selection. It's certainly better than taking the 6. They would have to get to 6. I hate when they put it right on the solid number and don't add the half, because they would have to get to 6 to win. So put it this way, Matthew, that you should be in good shape with UCLA at 5. Oh, we lost your super chat there. You should be okay with UCLA at 5 because, if anything, you're not going to lose money. They're not winning 6. So, at the worst, you push it, and you probably have I'll say a 60 to 70% chance of winning it, and a near 0% chance of losing. Not that UCLA couldn't go 6-6. If they win the 2 non-conference games and then they beat Indiana, that's 3. They beat Minnesota. They go to Rutgers and win, and they pull off another upset. They either go to Washington and win or beat USC. They could win 6, but it's fairly unlikely. So here are your odds I'll give you. I'll give you a 60 to 70% chance of winning, only about a 5 to 10% chance of losing, and everything else in between is a push. Okay, USC over 7. Now, I was pretty confident about this one being a good bet until a couple weeks ago. And the more I stared at this schedule, USC has a lot of losable games. They're all winnable. They can win every game on the schedule, but they only have one game on the schedule that they will win for sure, and that's Utah State. They could lose every one of these games. So you need an over 7. You need USC to get to 8 wins. Okay. Let's say they lose to LSU. They're a touchdown underdog in week 1. They beat Utah State. They're at 1. They lose on the road to Michigan. They're still sitting at 1. Let's say they beat Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State. Let's say this is where I think USC may get bogged down from. Let's say they are 1-2 on the last weekend of September. They are 1-2, and Wisconsin's coming to town. They have 3, 6, 7 games, 8 games. I'm going to put UCLA there. 9 games. None of those are automatic wins. UCLA is the closest, and I don't consider that. I've seen USC and UCLA play for way too long for me to consider that an automatic win for what is a less than stellar USC team. Minnesota on the road would be the next safest, but they go to Minnesota, they go to Maryland. Washington's probably not going to be that good, but it's in Seattle. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Out of those 9, they could be, if they're 1-2, if they are 1-2 after Michigan, they could go 5-4. Shoot, they'd have to go 6, and even if they went 6-3 the rest of the way. Yeah, I'm not real sold. For a long time, I was thinking USC is going to go 9-3 this year. And I looked at, Wisconsin's a pretty good team, but they should win that game and they'll beat Minnesota. Even Penn State at home. They've got them at home, so they'll probably be, if Penn State turns out to be what we think Penn State is and USC turns out to be what we think they are, we've got like a top 15 to 20 team, meaning a team that's just slightly better, and they've got them at home. So they should be a 3 or 4 point favorite. So I just kind of marched through one by one. Yeah, they should beat Maryland. Yeah, they should beat Rutgers. Yeah, they should beat Washington, who's the most different team of anybody in the country from last season to this season. They should beat Nebraska. If you take them individually, they should win all those games. But I don't know that it's not a gauntlet. Like those teams aren't that good, but it's relentless. They are constantly playing somebody who can beat them. Man, if they don't beat LSU and they go to the Big House and lose their second game there, they've got to go 6-3 against that stretch. And if they're at 1-2, yeah, I think USC's better than 7-5 against most schedules. Like I think that, like I look at them as better than a 7-5 team, but against that, to get them to 8-4, they should. But man, I think okay. I will use the same logic as I use with the UCLA pick. Since it's right on the number, you're safe. They're not going 6-6. You're safe that you're not going to lose money. But don't be surprised if you don't win anything. Don't be surprised if it lands right on 7-5. Because they could lose 2 of the first 3, and then they could go 6-3 down the stretch and be 7-5. Iowa, we don't even need to look at. But hey, while we're hanging out, why not? Iowa. Where are they? Yeah. So Iowa's just a team you can trust. Like when they play UCLA at the Rose Bowl, they probably will win that game 21-13. And so it won't look like there's much difference between those two teams, but that's how they're going to win every game. They should be 4-0 when they go to Columbus. They should be. At the very worst, they're going to be 3-1 if they lose to Iowa State, who's a pretty good football team, but they do play them at Kinnick. So they're 4-0. They lose to Ohio State, which I do believe they've got a shot in that game. I don't count that as an automatic win for the Buckeyes. But they're 4-1 at that point. They beat Washington. They beat Michigan State. They're 6-1. They beat Northwestern. They're 7-1. Let's say they trip up against Wisconsin or one of these teams, and they're 7-2. And they've got 3 more games to win a game, and it's UCLA, Maryland, and Nebraska. Yeah, this looks like a 9-3 season. So I think you're in good shape with Iowa. I would give it a 80-some% chance of winning, getting you to 8 wins. And then Rutgers over 6. Rutgers has by far the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. It's not even close. Where's their schedule? Oh, I just had it there. Shoot. This is the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, and it's not even debatable. Rutgers does not play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, or Iowa. They are not playing the media selections for the top 5 teams in the conference. Now, how does that happen? That shouldn't happen. The scheduling should be better than that. Or I just figured that they figure, the scheduling department, Rutgers is not going to be a factor, so it doesn't matter. But it does matter. They should try to make these schedules balanced. So you got the Howard Bison, and Rutgers has to get to 7 wins. Well, they're going to win the first 2. So there's 2. They handled Virginia Tech last year, but they've got to go on the road, and Virginia Tech is going to be improved, I believe, as one of the top returning production teams in the country. So let's say they lose that one. But they come back and they beat Washington, lose to Nebraska, they're 3-2. They lose to Wisconsin, they're 3-3. They win one of the next 2, they're 4-4. And they've got to get to 6. They've got Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State. Yes. Or they've got to get to 7. Rutgers has to get to 7. The first 2. Washington 3. Wisconsin 4. UCLA 5. Minnesota 6. And one of the last 3. Okay. Or they don't lose to Wisconsin or they don't beat Wisconsin and they've got to win 3 of the last 4. I would say that they should do that. And if Rutgers can't navigate that schedule to 7-5, then they have big problems in the future. Massive problems. So my odds of you winning these bets would be UCLA at 70%, USC at 30%, Iowa at 85%, and Rutgers at 60 or 70%. But most of the remaining percentage is not a loss. It's a push. I would guess that you're going to go 2-1-1 on those 3. Yeah, 2 wins, a loss, and a push. That's my Mark that down, Matthew. Mark down that Mark says 2 wins, a loss, and a push. And we'll see how close I am. We'll save this for the end of the year. Which reminds me, I should do a win total, because my win totals for a couple of years, and that's not my thing, win totals. That's a Steve Dace thing. Check out Steve Dace on the win totals. He always has me go through his win totals, which he did a few weeks ago, and I forget his record, but it was a good 70-some% on win totals. Over 70% on win totals. And I did it. I was inspired by him, so I did it for a few years, and I don't remember my record, but I was in the 60%, 65% range. And Matthew, USC is better than those teams that I just think that they could trip up against. Like, they could run that table. Like, they're better than all that stretch of teams between Michigan and Notre Dame. So they really should only drop one of those games instead of 3 or 4. So maybe you'll go more like 3-1 or 2-0-1. Is that a thing? No, that 3-0-1 maybe. So yeah, I think you've got a good play right there. It strikes me as similar to a few years ago. I looked at Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia all at 10.5, and I thought 2 out of these 3 are going to go 11-1 at least, if not 12-0. These teams don't go 10-2, so I'll take all 3 of them, and even if one of them go 10-2, then you win 2 out of 3. We are hanging out for Justin Adams from our Nebraska channel, Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm, possibly Daniel House from Gophers Guru. And we will check on your comments and questions. Yes, Nick, Rutgers would be ecstatic with 8-4. And this is the year to do it. They have a senior-laden team. Greg Schiano is just claiming that they've got NFL players all over the place, which he's exaggerating, but I get his point. They do. They've got a pretty healthy roster, their best roster. They have a better roster than they had, I would be willing to say, during their nice run in the Big East. They just played in a weak-ass conference then, so they won a bunch of games for a few seasons there. Yeah, let's get Rutgers to the playoffs. Let's see. Rutgers would have to go 10-2. But even if they went 10-2, they could be the one Big Ten team that would get left out at 10-2, because the argument may be, okay, this schedule's terrible. They win the first 2. They go to Virginia Tech. They win. They beat them by 19 last year, so they could win again against Virginia Tech. Very physical Rutgers team. Good running game. Got a better quarterback this year in Ethan Kalkumanis. They should be a much better passing team. Not great, not even good, but much better. They were awful last year, and they've been awful since our guy Gary Nova, 2011, 2012. So 3-0. Then they win the road or the home game against Washington. They're 4-0. Let's give them a loss at Nebraska. They're 4-1. They beat Wisconsin to get to 5-1. They beat UCLA. They're 6-1. They go out to the LA Coliseum and lose. They're 6-2, but they win the Final Four Minnesota at home, at Maryland, Illinois, at Michigan State. They could win all 4 of those games. They're 10-2 with losses to USC and Nebraska. Or between Virginia Tech, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and USC, those 4, they split. But they cannot. They're going to be, if Rutgers is the team that we think they are going to be, which is about the 40th best team in the country, they're going to be a favorite in all these other games, but not by much. Like, they're going to be playing Michigan State the final week of the season, and they might be 9-2. In this fairyland scenario, Rutgers is going to be 9-2, and Michigan State's going to be 4-7. But Rutgers will only be a 2.5-point favorite on the road. They'll play Illinois, and Illinois, with 2 games left, is going to be 5-5. And Rutgers is going to be 8-2, and they're going to have Illinois at home, and they're still only going to be a 5.5-point favorite. They're going to play at Maryland, and even though Rutgers at that point is going to be 7-2 in our fairyland scenario, they're still going to be an underdog playing a Maryland team that's probably going to be 5-4. They'll be an underdog at Maryland by a field goal. They'll barely be a favorite against Minnesota. Minnesota at this point, Minnesota's got a tough schedule. So with 4 games to play, Minnesota could be 3-5. And Rutgers, let's say they're 6-2. They'll be a 3.5-point favorite against Minnesota. Rutgers in this way is Iowa. The margins are like this. All right, Matthew's coming back here. Appreciate that. I noted it, Mark. So what did I say? 2-1-1. I'm kind of leaning 3-0-1 possibly, because I think USC will give you a win at 8-4. I don't think USC is going to go 7-5. So I didn't want to lead you down that path. That I'm just saying that it's possible that USC could be a really good team, but run into some bad luck and get mucked up in that run of pretty difficult games. But I think they'll navigate it. And I think I may actually go 3-0-1. But anyway, it's noted. Okay, you've got Florida over 4.5, Iowa State over 7.5, Oklahoma State over 7.5, and Syracuse over 7. Okay, well, we will look at the schedules. Off the top of my head, I like the first 3. The Syracuse one to get to 8-4. All right, let's start with Florida. Oh, come on. That is not clickable. Where's the... Okay. All right, Florida. Okay, we need to get Florida to 5. The first game's a toss-up. 50-50. So let's say Florida wins. Florida wins that game, and they beat Samford, and they're 2-0. They've got Texas A&M at home. They go to Mississippi State. Let's say they split those 2. They're 3-1. They beat UCF. They're 4-1. They have to win one other game. Most likely that's going to be at home against Kentucky to get to 5-7, and they lose every other game. Now, I know a lot of people, including myself, have looked at this backstretch, the final 5 games especially, but you could even extend that to the final 7 games, but the final 5 games, and said they're losing all those games. You know what? You know what wager I would take? I would take a parlay that they would win one of those games, that they would beat LSU at home, or they'd beat Ole Miss at home, or they would go on the road and beat Florida State, that they would win one of those games. So I'm going to say that Florida wins one of the final 5. They split. I'm going to say there's one, and then this other grouping of games, they win 3 of these games. So they're at 4. The Samford game's 5, and maybe they get to 6 with Miami. So I am heavily leaning in your favor, Matthew, at over 4.5. I would say over 4.5. So fortunately, we don't have a push situation. I'm going to say you've got a 65 to 70% chance of winning that wager. Now we've got Iowa State over 7.5. Now they go on the road against Iowa. And most people would consider that to be an automatic loss. It is not. It is not. Now, let's also consider that Iowa State's history tells us that they could lose the first game of the season to North Dakota. They have a run of losing these kind of games, even under Matt Campbell. They lost one last year to the Ohio Bobcats. Okay, let's say they do lose in Kinnick Stadium, which is probably about a 75% certainty. But again, don't be surprised if they win at Iowa, as they did 2 years ago. So they're 2-1. They go to Houston. They win 3-1. They beat Baylor at home. They're 4-1. Okay, 4-1 entering October 12th. They could win the next 3 games and be 7-1. Let's say they drop one. They're 6-2 going to Kansas. And then out of those final 4 at 6-2, they beat Cincinnati and probably beat one of the other 3, most likely Kansas State at home. That gets them to 8-4. I'll put it this way, Matthew. I would say on the Iowa State to get to 8, I'm going to give you a 70 to 75% chance of winning that one. All right, let's talk Hawkeyes. We got Corey Brada dropping by just when we're talking about the mighty Cyclones.
Right on cue, Mark. Right on cue. Yeah.
We're just missing Levi.
Yeah. No, we're not. So here's the deal. Good week. A lot of fluff as we normally get. What on earth happened with Deshaun Foster? Can we cover that first? I'm assuming you were watching that live as I was. I tend to tune in for the most bizarre things. I don't watch a lot of television, but whenever I do, something bizarre happens.
Well, I will tell you, as I believe I did the other day, that I have watched Big Ten Media Days start to finish for I don't know how many consecutive years. But this year, I watched everything on tape delay online. So do you know who pointed me in the direction of checking out Deshaun Foster, which I will watch every coach. I already have watched, I believe, every coach except maybe 2. So I would have watched him anyway, except I caught your tweet.
Yeah. I tweeted it right when it happened because I was literally, I was sitting here with mouth agape, as I was watching Deshaun Foster just stare at nothing. And I still don't know what happened there. Like, did he, besides just getting stage fright and having butterflies, did you literally come to the podium with absolutely nothing prepared? It was the strangest few seconds I've ever witnessed at the Big Ten Media Days.
And it carried on and on and on. So it was a few seconds that lasted like 45 seconds.
Yes.
And I understand that that's not everyone's forte. But like you just said, did he have nothing prepared? Aren't you standing waiting in the wings? So I'm the type guy, and this happens to me a lot. And I was having this conversation with somebody recently talking about preparing for presentations. I tend to slough off those kind of situations and just think, I'll be fine. I'll know what to say when the time comes. I'll go up there with little practice and just wing it, and I'll be fine. But I also know how to prepare myself the final 10 to 15 seconds leading into it. Like when he's standing there and they're going through a 30 to 40 second presentation of introduction, that would be circulating in my head. Okay, I want to say this. This is going to be my opening statement, even if I prepared nothing to that point.
I thought the worst part of it was when he froze and he was like obviously struggling to figure out what to say. The one thing he could think of was, "We're in LA, just like USC."
Yeah, he said something strange like we've got USC with us or something like that.
He said it's just us and USC. He's
Just
talking about the city of LA. It's just us and USC.
Yeah.
I mean, why are we promoting the biggest rival? And I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But no, I'm nothing against Deshaun Foster, but I was skeptical of that hire when it came down. I just think it was an odd hire. The guy that doesn't have head coaching experience this level, nothing close. And obviously they struggled. There's a reason why Chip Kelly got out of there when he could. But I was impressed with Deshaun when he was taken aside and spoke to the media later in a little bit of video footage I got. And it sounds like he kind of put it together. I'm sure he was embarrassed. So we've all had those moments. I just seemed odd in that moment. First one of the day.
Yeah. So it's part of our jobs to be critical, but also to be understanding. So I think we can be a little bit of both. I was taken aback as well, but also I have screwed up many times in a public setting. So
by the way, aren't we? I'll tell you what, I hope Lincoln Riley loses every game this year. When I see him walking through the tunnel, and it's not just his aura. I have nothing against him as a person. I don't know him as a person, but something about Lincoln Riley gives this aura of elitism. And I don't know if you get that as well. He hasn't been a focal point in the game as long as a lot of people. I never got that with guys like Nick Saban. Certainly don't get that with Kirk Ferentz. Now they're older guys, but I just get this really pompous, like USC's got nothing to be braggadocious about in this decade. They really don't. True. Besides getting beat by Tulane. So when I saw him walking through the tunnel and his wife or whoever that was has this really short, tight skirt on, and it looks like we're going to some red carpet event. I'm like, this is Big Ten Media Days. This is not Hollywood. I know he's living in LA and he thinks he's some celebrity now, but I hope they lose every game.
Well, wait a minute. You just stated, Corey, that you don't know the man and don't know any of this, but then you're stating it. Now you can say that's your perception.
I did. I said that's the aura. I said that's the aura that I gather. I hope they lose every game. I hope they lose every game. And he also did Oklahoma dirty, so I hope he loses every game. He doesn't seem to me to be of the Kirk Ferentz mold. And when I say that, there's a degree of bias there, but I'm talking about somebody who's just willing to do it the right way and not step on people's faces. Like there are people in the Iowa mold that I've lost respect for because they're willing to step on other people. Jay Norvell's one of those guys. I called Jay Norvell out a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. I think he's a crybaby. I think he's disloyal. I have no interest in Jay Norvell ever coming back to coach for Iowa. Now, different story with Riley. I'm simply saying he gives the aura of being an elitist, and I don't like that.
Corey showed up today, folks. Love it. Okay. I tend to agree. Like, my feeling about Lincoln Riley and how he projects himself and how I see him is similar to you. But I tend to pull back and think, is that me? When I hear him speak, I don't hear that out of him.
Yeah. I don't listen. I don't pay attention because I really don't care. But the USC fans that have joined, that's the other part of this. I think it's the fan base paints a bad picture for people like Riley, because when you have fans that are entering the conference acting like you're going to come in and dominate the conference, similar to what we saw in Nebraska in 2012. And I'm not saying they're going to have the same results, but wouldn't it be funny if USC went like 6-6 or 7-5? Like, the idea that you're going to come in and dominate a conference. And by the way, the last time USC played Iowa, all I remember Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson talking about was how fast Iowa looked on the field compared to USC. Offensively, how fast they looked offensively compared to the Trojans. So anyways, we can get off that.
No. Let's not get off that. Let's take it in a different direction, because Kirk was asked about the comment that he made, and it obviously was about USC because he mentioned Ronnie Lott. That was brought up to him. Did you hear that?
Was that in the main podium availability? I don't think I did hear that.
That was at the main podium.
Okay, maybe I missed that. That must have been the last question.
I believe. I took note of it, that somebody mentioned the USC jab, and he somewhat backpedaled on it. He took accountability for it. Of course, he said it, but he said all the right things, that USC is a great program, that they always have great athletes, that I expect them to be a main contender in our league. And he did point at himself to say, he used the term drive-by scouting. He said, I don't like drive-by scouting, and that's what I probably did there.
Who said that?
Kirk. He said that about himself.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Kirk is a humble guy. That's why. That's called being self-aware, that, hey, he may feel a certain, it's just like how he feels toward James Franklin. He didn't like Franklin, but he was complimentary of Franklin. He was asked about James Franklin this week and complimented his tenure at Vanderbilt and has been impressed with what he's done at Penn State. But I can tell you right now, he does not like James Franklin. So
this is another thing that you brought to light on social media, was that James Franklin, at the conclusion of his address, pointed out his admiration for Kirk Ferentz and his accomplishments. And you raised an eyebrow as to why would James Franklin point out Kirk Ferentz?
I thought that was strange. I mean, he was talking about longevity in the conference, and I get the connection between there's not much longevity with coaches or players nowadays. To see somebody like Kirk, who's been at Iowa 25 years, I get that. I just thought it was an odd way to end his opening statements, especially given those coaches, their history, because there have been words said and things that have happened in that series, etc. We don't need to bring those up right now, but it's not a secret that those two are not the biggest fans of each other.
So yes, so you brought that up on social media, and initially my thought was, okay, I'm going to watch the James Franklin press conference anyway, so I was looking out for that. And my initial thought was, yes, this is strange. But then I thought, okay, did James Franklin, number one, did he follow Kirk directly?
No.
Oh, he did not? Okay. I thought maybe...
I let me think about that. I don't believe maybe he did. Now, I don't want to say that. He may have.
That could be part of it. That could be one thing. He could have been standing off to the side watching Kirk Ferentz's news conference, and then he was the next coach, and so he noted.
Kiss, Mark. He's standing to the side. That doesn't mean you got to kiss the guy's
I didn't say that he had to. I'm just making an explanation.
Yeah. Well,
the second one could be along the lines that you just mentioned, Nick Saban stepping down was the dean of college football coaches. Is Kirk now? He is the dean of college foot, not just in the Big Ten, I think nationally.
Well, Kirk was the dean of college football before Nick Saban stepped down. If you're talking about longevity at a specific school.
Oh, at a specific school. No, I was talking about longevity in coaching.
Yeah, but Nick Saban went to the NFL and coached.
Well,
Kirk has been
years. Okay, I understand that. But regardless, however you want to slice it, Nick Saban had coached longer than Kirk. So maybe,
well,
again, whether I'm not saying that it's unjust to make it a continuous run to count. So I have no issue with that. But I'm saying other people may say that Nick Saban was the dean of coaches, that he had coached the longest. Now, actually, Mac Brown started before Kirk, but he took 5 years off. So he's not the dean. So Kirk, in however way you slice it now, is undoubtedly the dean. So maybe without stating it, without James Franklin saying, okay, now since Nick Saban has stepped down, Kirk Ferentz is the dean, and I would like to just recognize him.
I guess what I'm experiencing is something, like I said, similar to what we got with Nebraska back, 12 years ago, is the arrogance. And I don't hear, maybe I'm
That's
not
arrogance.
No. I'm not talking about James Franklin. I'm referring back to the USC thing for a second. I don't get it from Oregon fans. I don't hear it from UCLA or Washington fans. It's USC fans. They very much remind me. They're like the Michigan fans of the Pac-12. And y'all know what Michigan fans do. They whine and they whine and they whine, and they wait for you to worship their feet. All right. And when I refuse to do that, they whine some more. All right. So I guess that's what I'm saying. I think we've got a lot of pompous, arrogant fan bases now in the Big Ten, not just with Michigan, and it's not everybody, right? But some of the loudest people in those fan bases are some of the most arrogant. And I've said the same thing about Nebraska fans. I love Wisconsin from a standpoint of, hey, they're a healthy rival, but I don't have to listen to them day and night. All right. There are some fan bases that are very loud and very obnoxious. And that's my point. I think that paints a bad picture. Now, I got a lot of respect for Matt Rule, because to me, he doesn't have that aura that Lincoln Riley has. I got a lot of respect for Luke Fickell. I got a lot of respect for Matt Campbell. Have you ever heard me say a negative word about any of those coaches, Mark?
No.
Okay. So there you go. And by the way, like I say, I got nothing against. What vendetta would I have against? I speak my mind. What vendetta would I have against USC? Like I say, Iowa beat them the last time they played. They spanked them. They spanked them pretty good. And so what reason do I have to dislike USC other than I'm just being honest and based on the perception that I gather when I watch Lincoln Riley, and I don't listen to him speak that much, but anyways.
I would love to moderate a debate. I don't know what the debate would entail, though, between you and Tim Prangley, Iowa and USC. That would be great. Oh,
okay. Well, as you know, I'll debate anybody at any time.
But again, I don't know that it's a legitimate debate because I don't know what we're debating. But
yeah, I don't know either. It's all opinion. People don't like opinions, and so they want to get angry that somebody has an opinion that's different than theirs. I don't care.
I'll take Michigan and USC fans off the hook slightly to this point. Every fan base obviously has delusional fans, ridiculous fans, etc. But the blue blood, it only makes sense. It's only logical would have a larger portion of their fan base that would be arrogant because they have something to be arrogant about. I'm not saying that they should be arrogant, but that only makes sense.
Well, I'll say this. If anybody had a right to be arrogant, it'd be Ohio State fans. And to a degree, Michigan fans, although the dominance we've seen this century from Ohio State has been like nothing I've seen in my lifetime from a Big Ten conference standpoint. So that would be the one program to me that has the right to be arrogant. And I don't experience the arrogance from Ohio State. And there have been fireworks between Iowa and Ohio State. You think about what happened in 2017, and then
Sure.
Here 2 years ago, what they experienced at Ohio State, and yet I don't get that from Ohio State fans. So I just, like I say, I always think it's funny when people get upset about someone else's opinion. Like someone else doesn't have the right to have their own opinions. We don't. Hey, one time Mark, I'll tell you a story. One time I made the comment. I said, I don't think Stevie Nicks has any sort of a voice. I think she's horrible. And somebody looked at me and said, you don't have the right to have that opinion. What world are we living in to where I don't have a right? Not only is my opinion wrong, I don't even have a right to have it.
This is the irony of ironies. Just today. And do you know how much Stevie Nicks crosses my mind? Like once every 5 years. I was on Facebook and somebody posted just the vocal audio of some Stevie Nicks track to say, oh, what an amazing voice she has. We take away the music and just play the vocal, which I wasn't going to ruin my day by damaging my eardrums to do that.
Yep.
So I didn't need to hear the vocal. I've heard her sing or attempt to sing enough that I just left a comment that said, Stevie Nicks can't. And then I put ... My parents taught me that if I don't have anything nice to basically say, she can't sing. She's horrible.
I agree.
So that's hilarious.
I mean,
that just happened today.
I said the same thing about John Lennon. I don't think John Lennon had any sort of a voice, but I also think he's a brilliant musician. I think Stevie Nicks is probably a brilliant musician.
I would agree with the John Lennon take. Yes.
Totally different things. And I see your boy Prangley in the chat says that he doesn't want to debate someone who doesn't listen to someone but hates them. Did I ever say I hated Lincoln Riley? All I said is I hope he loses every game. All right. And he gives this aura of arrogance. That's all I said. So I know Prangley can't handle whenever somebody is critical about his favorite team. I know his objectivity is second to none, but there's no hate. It's all sports, and sports. There's things bigger than sports, but everybody has a right to their own opinions.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I don't know what it is, but Lincoln Riley has given me that vibe. But when he actually opens his mouth, and I'm sure that it sounds like I've listened to him speak a lot more than you have, then I tend to warm up to the guy and think he sounds and seems like a decent guy. But I don't know the man. So I've got one more theory on the James Franklin comment about Kirk Ferentz.
Real quick, neither does Tim Prangley. So go ahead.
No, he does not. And even the coaches that I like, I will put out the condition there. If we find out tomorrow that they beat their kids or their wife, I'm not defending that. Like, I'm just saying, based on what I see, based on what the public persona of that person is, I like them, but I'm not their friend. I can't vouch for them as an individual.
Yeah, and I can't vouch it. You can't vouch against him, right? He may be a great person.
Yes, unless something comes out that we would hear about.
Absolutely.
So my last possible theory on the James Franklin comment about Kirk was that James Franklin was actually being the person that you're depicting Lincoln Riley to be, that he was being smug and thinking, I'm going to make this kind of tongue-in-cheek, honoring and recognizing Kirk Ferentz for all these great accomplishments. Like I kind of took it possibly in that direction.
Well, I didn't feel that when he was saying what he said, but like I said in my tweet, I just thought it was random. And Kirk Kirk says a lot of things tongue in cheek, but you can usually tell when he's doing that, and he was being genuine. I'm sure he heard what Franklin said. They don't play each other this year, so there's no reason to, butter someone else's biscuit, I guess. So I'm sure that's not what it was. As far as Kirk is concerned, Mark, I obviously very positive week. What is this comment on the screen? What? I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't say, hey, listen, let's not, get too generalized here. And all I said was the loudest Cornhusker fans are oftentimes the most annoying. I love the. Hey, listen, Beatles are great. Didn't think John Lennon could sing. Song Imagine has been redone by countless musicians, and I don't think I've ever heard a version that wasn't better than John Lennon's. All right, I love Ice Cream. So
yes, I love my ice cream. And the Beatles, I think they're the greatest band of all time, but not based on my own. Like, if I never heard another Beatles song the rest of my life, I would be just fine. Like, I don't care to listen to them.
Yeah.
And in terms of Nebraska fans, what could be the annoying thing there, and I've done a Nebraska show for 3 or 4 years, and the great majority of them are just fine. They understand their place, but there are a few of them that don't really understand that they've sucked, like sucked, been horrible for 6 or 7 years and really done nothing for 12 or 13 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, I mean, the last USC national championship was when?
2004.
Okay, so 20 years ago. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have great history. Never claimed that. I just, what have you done for me lately, I guess. Anyways, and by the way, I got nothing against your boy Tim Prangley. I don't know your boy Tim Prangley, but I just saw the little chatter in the chat, so I figured I'd address it. But Kirk was very positive this week. He did. A couple of things stood out to me. Brought up the O-line several times. I think 3 different times. He did several interviews, one with CBS, one with Big Ten Network, of course, talked to the local media and the national media. Brought up that he thinks that they've got 7 offensive linemen that can play and potentially start. So 7 starting level offensive linemen is a big step forward from what we've seen over the last three years or so. Brought up the wide receiver room. Sounds like he's more positive there than one would think. He does think Cade is the starter at quarterback, but he also made the comment that there are no incumbents. So the depth chart that was released, I'm going to be publishing a video on that here this evening. The depth chart that was released prior to his availability had Brendan Sullivan as the 3rd string quarterback behind Marco Lainez. But again, I think it means next to nothing. They have not seen these transfers in an Iowa jersey yet, technically speaking. These guys have been working, player-led practices and obviously strength and conditioning, but they're not going to be cracking pads until next month. So we'll see what happens there. I would expect Brendan Sullivan to at least be number 2. And of course, Cade's health is a question mark as always, but very positive from Kirk. It seems like every year we get the same, as his career goes on, the same laid back type of interviews with people like Jerry DiNardo and Howard Griffith, where you don't get a ton of substance. A lot of it's so reflective and, how do you feel about where college football is headed? How do we fix it? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't listen to all the other coaches, including Lincoln Riley, as I said earlier, but I'm guessing they're a little bit more specific with those guys about their teams and positions and whatnot. So obviously it'll be nice to get Kirk at Iowa Media Day here in a couple of weeks and see them at Kids Day. That was confirmed today by Iowa that the open practice is on August 10th, the day after Iowa Media Day, as it normally is. So we'll get a look at the team then.
Okay, here's a few observations from me. I'd like to get your take. One would be, he, of course, was extremely complimentary of Tim Lester.
Yep.
He values having a former head coach on staff. And I heard that from a lot of coaches, not just this week, but both at the other conference media days, that the coaches that do have another head coach on staff are seeing a great value in that going forward with all the stuff that's on their plate. And I just thought he did a great job, Kirk did, of describing what Tim Lester brings to the table in terms of his ability to listen to the players and then take their feedback and change and adapt, his knowledge of the game, his knowledge of his offense, that he's a leader, all those things were well stated.
Only thing he didn't do, and he was asked about specifics. I can't remember if it was Big Ten Network or CBS asked him about specifics and what we would see differently with the X's and O's. And he kind of said, well, we're going to have to wait and see what we get in August. But I was happy to hear him talk about how uncomfortable it was for him with this new offense and learning it, because that's an indication that, hey, the changes are happening. If there's any doubt that there are going to be significant changes, yes, Kirk is going to stick with his belief system that it starts up front. And, that's what you want Kirk Ferentz doing, is focusing on the offensive line as an offensive line coach. But clearly, from a language standpoint, formational standpoint, there are going to be a lot of changes. He brought up the helmet communication. He thinks that's going to be a real assist for Iowa because of the new lingo of this offense. It comes at a good time, given the fact that Iowa's making these changes.
This is what I find amusing on a regular basis. And now that it's all said and done with Brian, and he's no longer a factor and he's off the board and they can move ahead with this offense, it's somewhat amusing to me that when speaking of the struggles of the offense of the last 4 or 5 years, he speaks of it in such mild terms, like everything was fine. They just needed to tweak something here and there. Like, I even jotted down here, the offense wasn't exactly where we wanted it to be.
Well, what do you expect him to say about
15 points a game? And that's with the defense scoring a third of that.
Mark, why would he sing a different tune than he sang during the course of each season?
I'm just so amused by it. I'm thinking, can't you just come out now that it's over and say, our offense was horrendous. We need major changes. We're looking for Tim Lester to improve us significantly.
Well, he did make it. Here, I'll say this. I'll give him an attaboy on this. He did make a comment. He kind of finally put quarterback in the same boat as offensive line. He brought up how we haven't been where we need to be over the last couple of years. We've not gotten great offensive line play, and he basically said we have not had great quarterback play. And you and I both know, at times over the last 3 years, he's put the blame almost exclusively on the offensive line and said how we need to help the quarterback out. So to hear him bring up quarterback play as something that needs a bump, that was good to hear. And they should get that. I mean, with the depth that they have at quarterback, I think it's easier for Kirk to say that now, because even if Cade goes down, they have a guy with experience in Brendan. One thing he did fall back on as it relates to favoring Cade is, and whether you agree with it or not, he still places a lot of value and emphasis on what a quarterback has done to help his team win. And he brought up Cade's record at Michigan. And I think if there's probably he didn't say this verbatim, but if there's a tiebreaker between Cade and Brendan, stats aside, it's Cade won a lot more at Michigan, and Brendan has not at Northwestern. Fair or unfair, I think that's what Kirk falls back on.
Okay. I wrote down the specific quote, the specific words, and maybe this was Kirk being a little careless with his words, maybe not. He said that Cade has a, quote, huge advantage. Now, I thought, do you take this one of two ways? Do you take this as we are perceiving them exactly even right now, and I expect that's going to be a huge advantage, his experience, and we will see it play out, but I'm expecting to see that be a huge advantage? Or it's theoretically an open competition, but he's got a huge advantage in my mind because he's got all this experience and success. And so Brendan Sullivan's going to have to completely outplay him.
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Mark. I think in the end, Kirk really values knowing that his quarterback has led his team to the promised land. I just think and so I get your question. I really do think it's the latter. Yeah. Now the good news is, we've talked about Kirk's shortcomings as it relates to evaluating quarterback play in the past, evaluating offensive play in general. But like, the bottom line is, the hope here should be that it doesn't matter, that it won't matter, because they've got two solid options, whether he favors Cade and, whatever. They have two solid options. Iowa's not going to win games because of quarterback play. They just have to they have to be able to get to a point where you're not winning in spite of quarterback play, which is what they've done a lot over the last 3 seasons. And, as it relates to other facets of the game, they finally have an offensive mind in Brian Ferentz. not an offensive lineman, or excuse me, offensive mind and Tim Lester, not an offensive lineman, and Brian Ferentz, to lead things and to lead the charge with play calling and with wide receiver development and spreading the ball around, etc. So, we don't need Kirk to be the offensive guru. We just need him to kind of stay out of the way of the guy that is.
Good point. I can't shake the stat that Iowa has not fielded a starting quarterback since 2015 with a 60% completion percentage, and that Brendan Sullivan threw 200 passes at Northwestern at 69%.
Like I've said, though, Mark, Cade McNamara's numbers were very similar at Michigan in 2021.
Sure. Yes. No, you're right. I'm not saying that he should be the starter. I just want to see a fair competition. And I'm just envisioning Iowa having a guy that's going to complete the simple throws.
Well, here's what I want. And Kirk, like I said, he said no incumbents. And when he talked about the battle, whether you believe it or not, when he talked about the battle, he included Marco Lainez in that conversation. So
Yes.
heck, hey, I want Marco Lainez to have every chance at winning the job. If he looks like the best guy this fall, let him start week 1. Now, I think, well, I can't think of a good analogy on the spot. I'm trying to think about like a cow jumping over the moon type of analogy. That's probably never going to happen, obviously. But my point is, hey, that's where the depth chart's listed right now. We've talked about Marco's upside. This ought to be a full, completely open competition. If Tim Lester's that good at developing guys, maybe he can get Marco ready.
And this is also the unlikely coach that's going to pull the trigger on that move.
Say that again.
This is the least likely coach to pull a trigger, even if he thinks Marco Lainez is probably got more upside and showed enough of that in camp. Kirk is risk averse.
Correct. You're right. But, again, we don't know what level of impact Tim Lester being here will have. We have not experienced that yet. So we don't know how risk adverse Kirk is going to stay. Yes, it's his program, and ultimately he's going to make those decisions. However, we just don't know what that dynamic is going to be like.
All right, Corey, great stuff out of you. Any other observations from Big Ten Media Days or anyone else that you would like to slice into?
No. For the record, I just want to say I don't hate Lincoln Riley. So for anybody wondering, I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody. So, but yeah, there are fan bases and coaches that get on a person's nerves. Hey, Dabble Sweeney gets on my nerves. I don't think Dabble Sweeney's a bad guy, but he gets on my nerves just listening to him talk. And knowing what he stood for with the portal and all this stuff. So I mean, it's different styles, and hey, guys make it work different ways. So, not saying Leonard won't be. Well, he's already been successful. So,
did you get a chance to check out my favorite coach in the Big Ten?
PJ.
PJ.
No, I saw you sent me a text about PJ. What did you say about PJ?
He loves to talk about Greg Schiano and what a great coach Greg Schiano is. And he even talked about there was a coach who moved from Schiano's staff to PJ's and vice versa. They traded two coaches in a sense. They didn't trade them. Obviously, they let them go, or the guy moved on and went to him. And he said, this is how he phrased it. So they all stayed in the family.
Okay. Well, maybe PJ's looking to hire Schiano when he gets fired.
I love PJ.
All right, Mark. I appreciate the time. I'll be publishing something later today for anybody curious.
Absolutely. Thank you, Corey. Right. Appreciate you being here. That was the voice of Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye at the Storm, and that's where you check out Iowa football on a daily basis, Iowa athletics on a daily basis with Corey. So Corey's the best. Corey joins me every Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 there in the Central Time Zone, 4:30 Central every Tuesday. So make that an appointment because that's a good time talking Iowa football, the Big Ten, and beyond. All right, folks. we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, and want to remind you that, again, take hold of your health, people. This is one of the most important things that you can do, is to take hold of your health. And we've got a training program for you, courtesy Chris Gates Fitness. And it's an online fitness training camp, courtesy Chris and his program, which is launching right now. And you can get in on the ground floor and get a remarkable rate at just $10 for the first month. That's 80% off. We've got a new sponsor here at the Voice of College Football, and boom, he is front and center. And I never have a sponsor here at the Voice of College Football that I have not tried myself. So we are embarking on the same thing. Chris is an online fitness coach. He's a massive college football fan, just like us. And he's created a fitness community designed specifically for football fans, just like you and me. And let me get my graphics in place to also let you know about the best way to elevate your health and fitness goals is to do it with a group of like-minded people. So there's a support component to this as well, a support group to encourage each of us. And so you got to check this out. Customized monthly workout programs will help you build muscle, burn fat, feel more athletic. You've got access to live Q&As with Chris, exclusive monthly, exclusive community support, and more to help hold you accountable and work you toward your goals. And most of us know that when it comes to health and fitness, when it comes to a workout regimen, it can be difficult to fight through the adversity, and we all need a helping hand. And Chris not only gives you the workout plan that changes by the day with a specific workout per day, but you also get his direction, his instructions on how to do the actual exercises themselves. Plus, there's a lot of fun involved. All training camp members compete in fitness challenges each month, as well as sports challenges like weekly football pick'em. Chris gives out free prizes like home gym equipment, supplements, free one-on-one coaching calls, and more. Join this week and use the code VOICE, as in Voice of College Football. Use the code VOICE and you'll get 80% off your first month at just $10. So jump on that right now. The link is in the description section of all the videos here at the Voice of College Football, and give it a shot. Just $10 for the first month. You can't go wrong. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. If you've just joined us, we had Iowa talk, USC talk, Penn State, Michigan, the ACC, and others. So just rewind the video to the start and you don't miss a full 3 hours. We are at 3 hours minus 9 minutes. Count them. That's 171 minutes of Voice of College Football. So enjoy, and we will see you soon. Our program rankings come out very soon, just here in the next few days.